Hello everyone. I think most of the people have come. So can we start our entire session? Medhatithi, then we are starting.
Yes, yes, sir, they are here, so we can, if they
Sir,
give the permission, we can start.
Please start. Please start.
Okay.
okay. Okay, then I'm starting with the welcome address. A
Do we
very
have Onindo here? Do we have Onindo here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. He has come.
Yes.
Okay, start it. Start.
Okay, sir. A very good afternoon to everybody. During last few months, our world has been going through a very tough situation. In this pandemic situation, our life has completely changed. It also has very serious impact on our daily lives. Still, we are trying to continue all our academic activities through online basis. Now, we will start our fifth technical session of the two-day international webinar. Today, the English department of Rishi Chandra College Evening and Rishi Chandra College Naihati have jointly hosted an international webinar on English literature from the margins of class, caste, race, and gender. In this session, we have paper presentation of profound HEI faculty, research scholars, PG students, and independent researchers. So, I hope this interactive session will be very enriching. Now, I would like to request our chairperson, Dr. Jasmeet Singh, Professor of RBC College for Women, and Professor Anindya Chakraborty, Professor of English Department of RBC College, to chair the entire session. May I request Jasmeet sir to say something and begin the session. Over to you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you, Mahua Sarkhel and Medhatithis Chakraborty. Good afternoon, all, and welcome to this session 5 of English Literature from the Margins. I am Dr. Jasmeet Singh, and I have the privilege to chair this session, which will run from 4 p.m. until 6:30 p.m. There will be, I suppose, 16 presentations, and every speaker will have 8 minutes for their presentation, followed by a minute or two for question and answer. I think our students coordinator will actually remind the presenters at 6 minutes that they have 2 minutes left now. So I think we need to stick to that 8 minutes mark and hope we will have a very enriching session. With this, I would now invite Professor Anindya to kindly say a few words.
Thank you, sir. So I'm very thankful that I have got the opportunity to be here with all of you. And for the presenters, I would like to request that as the time for the meeting is going to be recorded and we have the bound to complete this session before 7:30 p.m. So as Dr. Jasmeet Singh sir has suggested that we are going to have 8 minutes for the presentation of paper and 1 or 2 minutes for the question and answer session. So all the presenters are requested to complete their presentation within the given time. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anindya. I would request Mahua and Medhatithis to kindly conduct now.
Then, Medhatithi, please start introducing our first presenter.
Yeah. We have Alakananda Chakraborty, Ph.D. scholar, Jadavpur University, Kolkata, and her paper's title is Joy Shree Ram versus Joy Kali, the feminine cultural resistance against the alpha masculine Hindutva.
Sir, may I start?
I would request Alakananda Chakraborty to kindly present her paper. Ma'am, are you there online? You can. Definitely.
Good afternoon, everybody. The title of my paper is Jai Shri Ram versus Kali, the feminine religio-cultural resistance against the alpha masculine Hindutva. Those who control the present control the past, and those who control the past control the future. If anyone understands these prophetic words of Orwell the most, it's our current government. Every day we are witnessing history to be distorted and customized to serve the current regime. Was there a Hindu temple? Was there a Jain temple? Was Ram born there? Who cares? Ram is no longer a fictitious character. He has been represented in the court and won his case. His followers, ignoring the pandemic situation, participated in rallies chanting Jai Shri Ram. I wonder, post-independence, if Vande Mataram or Jai Hind has ever been this successful to stir emotion across the country. Now the question arises how a Hindu god has become a household signifier of nationalism in a nation which is constitutionally secular. Needless to say, even after 73 years of independence, the huge gap between the constitution and the dominant ideology is yet to be bridged. When Ram has become the poster boy of masculinist Hindutva, let's try to find out if there is a scope for resistance within the religion and culture, and if a female iconography can posit a protest in her own unique way. Quote, "My mind dancing, can I take much more? Can I bear an impossible beauty?" Unquote. Ramaprasad Sen cries in one of his Shama Songit. The impossible beauty here is the dark skin, violent, battle dancing on her husband's chest, goddess Kali. Her whole existence seemed unreal in Aryan culture and even in hegemonic Hindu culture of recent times. In pre-independence era, Kali became a symbol of strength and destruction among the freedom fighters. The freedom fighters worship Kali as the iconography of indigenous resistance against the Western culture. In the eyes of the British rulers, Kali was an epitome of exotic female sexuality, unbound. Ironically, the Western feminists too viewed Kali as a source of abundant sexuality. The manifolded possibilities of the deity seem to be overshadowed by the over-exotification of its Oriental origin. However, many Indian feminists have found an alternative model of femininity and motherhood in Kali. In the time of monolithic culture, we seem to forget that Lord Ram has been acculturated throughout the ages. For instance, Tulsidasa's Ram is boyish, soft man, whereas Madhusudan Datta's Ram is a lesser hero than that of Ravana. Cut to recent times. Here, the Ram who is alluded to by chanting Jai Shri Ram exhibits the Brahmanical dominance of singular Hindutva, withholding the possibility of the pluralist nature of Hinduism. To experience the plurality of the religion and the culture, the theologists and social scientists need to search for the pockets of resistance within the literature. Religion. Goddess Kali can be one such force of resistance, that too a feminine force. Can Kali be an embodiment of what Alfred Adler calls masculine protest? According to Lina Gupta, she certainly shakes off the gender roles, dancing her way to destruction. Kali can become the crusader against Brahmanical patriarchy. Tantrism revived the sexual mother in Kali. We have noticed that the tantrics, dacoits, other socially marginalized or aberrant people are often seen to be the devotees of Kali. Sumit Sarkar points out that Kali worship has not been limited to the Hindus. Also, Kali being a non-Aryan peripheral identity, can also become a part of the Dalit resistance. In essence, Kali can become a secular entity against the majoritarian religio-culture. The thinkers, the intellectuals, the communists are often seen being lost the battle against dominant ideology. One of the major reasons for such a state, in my view, is not being in sync with the pulse of the nation. We have to admit it is almost impossible to fight a dominant majoritarian religio-political ideology with atheism or apathy towards religion. So, when some Hindu beads are lynching a Zunaid or an Akhlaq, chanting Jai Shri Ram in the name of protecting the religion, there must be an oppositional force within the religion which will try to uphold the feminine force of the destruction of the evil. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I think Alakananda Chakraborty ma'am has quite clearly posited that Goddess Kali today has been used as a kind of posits a kind of a threat to the toxic celebration of Hindu male fantasy, namely Ram. That is what she is talking about, and I think this is quite relevant in the current scenario. Kali and Ram become quite synonymous to the current scenario, political scenario that we have in India today. So thank you, ma'am, once again. Now, I think it's open to question now if someone has certain questions. If anyone has questions for Alakananda, ma'am.
Sir, I think there is no question. Even in the chat box, there is no question.
Okay, I think in the chat box they are congratulating ma'am. So
Yes.
there are no questions.
Thank you, everyone.
So thank you, ma'am, once again for your presentation. Okay, now we move on to our next presentation. So kindly.
Okay, sir. Then we are moving on to our next presenter. Our next presenter will be Amit Kumar Mondol, a Ph.D. scholar, Utkal University, Bhubaneswar, and the title of his paper is Tribal Population in India, Social Discrimination. May I now request Amit Kumar Mondol to present his paper?
Is he present online? Kindly ask that.
So I think he's not there because his name is not showing here. I think he is
And
not
I think we
present.
should move on to the next speaker. We should move on to the next speaker.
Okay, sir. Our next speaker for today is Ananda Majumdar, Community Intern, Government of Alberta, General Coordinator, Let's Talk Service, University of Alberta. And his topic is Challenges of Women in Indian Diaspora and Identical Disparity.
Hi, are you listening to me?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. So the title of my paper is The Challenges of Women in Indian Diaspora and Identical Disparity. I have gone through a documentary analysis through a qualitative approach as per my methodology. And I have gone through the 3-3 portion of the status of Indian women in the past and the status of Indian women at present. Now, status of Indian women in the past, about something Zainism, Buddhism, and Christianity, they never actually pointed women or forced them in attaining the salvation. During the period of the Emperor Ashoka, women took part in religious preaching. The sister of King Harshavardhana, Princess Rajeshri, was an eminent scholar. So this is where their position when the Emperor Ashoka, King Harshavardhan, and also the women in South India like the Chalukya Vikramaditya. So they are the king in ancient times, and the position of the women was very nice over there. Now, when the invaders coming from the Central Asias and all these things, so there are a lot of narratives they have started for the women, such as the veil. They started to use the veil, which is a parda, to protect them from the rulers. And it was one of the causes that the women were losing their freedom in medieval India. So it just now started when the rulers came from the Central Asia and invade India through various means way. One of the rituals was Devdashi. So the rituals like Devdashi in South India was another torture of women, and in the name of the god. So they were a servant of the god who lived a life of celibacy and spent their lifetime by the worship of the lords in the temples. So they were temple singer and dancer for the pleasure of the god, and then kings of the South India would also invite them to perform at their court for their pleasure of comfort. And they then turned into a Rajdashi, which is a palace dancer. So that is kind of their position they started. And then there are others rituals, like rituals of sati, the rituals of jahar, the child marriage. And then I'm also not talking about something, a controversial point by monk Tulsidasa, and he was telling something like animals, the illiterate, lower caste, and women are subject to who should be beating. So I found something that he said, and I found something he didn't say. So it's kind of a controversial, but however, as a monk that I pointed out over here. So it was a savage nature of the Indian women's status. Now, sati, a ritual of the dying at the funeral pyre of the husband called the Shahagaman, the belief was the women will go to the eternal world for the direct moksha from the Lord. And it was a belief that at the funeral pyre of the husband is better than living as a widow. That is the holistic moment for women to become the perfect or touchless by another man. So that was the logic behind those sati and johar and all these things. So these are the status of the Indian women in the past, especially in the medieval India when the invaders come. But before, like Vedic India, it was very nice of those kings like Harshavardhana, Vikramaditya, and Emperor Ashoka. Now, what we have seen in the status of the present women in India, it is the same. I don't think so. It has been changed. Now, the present time we have seen, it is a sex-selective fasticide, female infanticide, and discriminations. It is a dowry death, and it's a Dalit torture, and also the abuse. So I will point it out about something, the dowry torture. So during 80s, the dowries that were one of the rise and one of the primary report in the media. The dowry is an important term in the upper and middle classes of India. The poverty's specific rituals practices with caste categories, and that made the dowry less controversial issue among the upper and middle class level. The curse of dowry would not perhaps imply among the lower caste, but the violence against Dalits and women, including the inclusive women, like a special disability women, also climbed up since 1994. Like estimated 12,000 per year in India, as the pervasive nature of violence, but because of the shame and dishonor, only a quarter of the rape case has been reported yearly. So that is one of the point like dowry that I have presented here, but there are other circumstances like Dalit torture and abusements and all these things. It has also gone through the child marriage, which is from the medieval India, it was 8 to 10, and from now the below 18, also in the present India. And then the illiteracy, widowed, sexual harassment. Now, widow in India is another women deprivations who are evicted from their marital homes and meant to look their needs on their own after the death of the husband. The children of the widow also are the victim and all. Education is one of the most important objectives for empowering women, but unfortunately, in the rural areas, the retention rate of the girls is lower comparing to the males. So these are the present situation in India.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir,
Yeah.
but it's almost 6 minutes is over. So you have more or less 2 minutes more to sum up your paper.
Okay,
So
thank you.
please
Okay.
kindly sum up.
Okay, thank you. So now the status of global women and the India. So India shares her research traditions, questionings, and the role of the nation to other colonial multinational corporates. The feminist, womanist, and social justice are two main agendas of right-wing fundamentalists, both in India and the United States. The situation in India and the situation in the world against women are similar within the writing on gender. And in the United States, there was a migrant like Miss Marvel Kamala Khan. If you go through the Marvel comics, you will see there are a lot of women heroes in all over the world. So one of them was Miss Marvel Kamala Khan, who was a migrant from Pakistan, and she escaped all the migrants and minorities of the women in the United States for the protections of their rights and intersectionalities and all these things. Now the conclusion. The Vedic India indicated women to follow as the divine mother. Not only in India, most of the countries have three, not only in India, most of the countries have three historical juncture, which is the caste, race, and gender. India from the beginning of our civilization have seen the various class struggles, and women is her most influential narratives. The class, gender, and classification as historical juncture have seen the social position of Indian women. The savage nature of Indian culture, such as the sati, has been analyzed by the British that transform Indian women from a social position into a political questions. Then the Indian nationalists again resolved these political questions through the construction of the series of the gender dichotomies, and that combined the women as the embodiment of authentic culture and the spiritual values. Now, how it can be solved? So implementation of a frame of empowerment, enlightenment about women in Indian society, and her spirit and practices by all narratives of the society can be maintained. A frame can be implemented over the women values that can evaluate through norms of respect, values, and social feminism. A fair, equally successful transformation of Indian social fabric for the importance of intersectionality and gendered bias can be possible when the people of India and the society will become more educated, and thus to avoid all kinds of the ancient blind faith and rituals. I think this is one kind of the solution to reduce the problem in Indian women and also the world women. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ananda Majumdar, sir. Your paper has successfully brought to light the history of Indian women and their present scenario as well. It also focused on the status of global women and how Indian culture has brought about a change in the status of women from a divine nature to an object of attraction in a male-dominated society. This is, in short, a brief summary of what you just narrated in front of us. So I would now like others to invite others if they have any questions for Ananda Majumdar, sir. Do we have any questions? I think we have no questions. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again for this wonderful presentation of yours.
Thank you so much for the opportunity once again to all of you.
Thank you. Now we move on to our next speaker. So kindly, if you can call out the name.
Our next presenter will be Ananya Ghosh. Ananya Ghosh, are you there? Sir, I think she's not there.
So if they are not there, we can move on to our next speaker.
Okay, then Medhatithi, you can introduce the next speaker.
Okay, and the next on our list is Anindya Som. Anindya Som, are you here? Anindya Som? I think she's also not here, sir.
I think the presenters who are not here, one of you should write down their names, okay? So that we don't have a confusion later on. We can move on to the next speaker now.
Next, okay. Mahua, the next speaker.
Okay, then our next speaker is Anisha Chattopadhyay. Anisha Chattopadhyay, are you there?
Yes, I'm present.
Okay, then She is the MA English Rishi Chandra College, Naihati, and the name of her paper is Hey You, Poor Black Human. Please start.
Good afternoon, my respected teachers and my friends. I am Anisha Chattopadhyay, a student of MA English in RBC, means in Rishi Bankim Chandra College, Naihati. So today I am to present my paper on gender and caste discrimination that prevails in our society since the ancient times. So first of all, I would like to apologize to everyone if I make any mistake or if I fumble something. And so now I start my presentation. Caste and gender prejudice is something that is ingrained in our society since the ancient times. Caste is an invisible concept, but it has the ability to suffocate and control the lives of other people. Dalits are the low-born people who are socially oppressed. And when we read Jatin Bala's On Firm Ground, we see protagonist Haldar's predicament just because being a Dalit, he had the courage to speak his heart out and give an appropriate reply to the upper caste men. There are several Dalit writers who portray the agony and the brutality and the subjugation that the Dalits are subjected to. Dalit literature aims at the portrayal of the struggle of the Dalits, and now I will be talking about the Dalit women who are doubly marginalized. Firstly, for being a Dalit, and secondly, for being a woman. Bama being a Tamil Dalit feminist, she portrayed the pangs and agony that the Dalit women are going through, that the Dalit women often go through. In her book Sangati, she speaks about the torture and the oppression that the Dalit women face. When we read Baburao Babul's mother, we see the predicament of a Dalit widow who happens to be Pandu's mother. Society cannot consider a widow mother pure as she ventures out to earn a living, and the upper caste men being ready to the upper caste men are ready to exploit her, taking advantage of her widowhood. When we speak about gender discrimination, how can we forget about Mahesh Dattani's Tara? Women are often considered inferior to men, and Tara points out this matter. In Tara, Chandan and Tara are the two Siamese twins who are separated by surgical operation. They were born with 3 legs, of which 2 were naturally connected to Tara's body. But the patriarchal society did not want Tara to live a healthy life, and the 3rd leg was given to Chandan, which turned into a dead flesh after 2 days. Had the leg been left with Tara, she could have lived the life of an able-bodied person. Society does not let women lead an independent life, perhaps for her financially dependent status. Virginia Woolf, one of the pioneers of feminist writings, in her A Room of One's Own, speaks about the necessity of a job for the women and a room of her own where her thoughts and where her thoughts will not be monitored. Before marriage, women are often told that they are living in their father's house. After marriage, they are told that they are living in their husband's house. And later, they are told that they are living in their son's house. So where is a woman's own house? Now, apart from male and female, there is another gender known as the transgender or the third gender. Third gender people are more neglected and marginalized than the other 2 genders. So what is transgender? Who are the transgender? Transgender people have a gender identity or a gender expression that is different from the sex assigned at birth. In Indian society, male and female are generally considered normal, and anybody other than male and female are considered inferior or abnormal. We get to hear that the transgender people are abandoned by their own family, and as a result, they struggle hard to earn a living. They are often seen begging at the railway stations or at the traffic signal. They are deprived of proper education. A very few transgender can manage to climb up the ladder of success in this very adverse situation. Living Smile Vidya and Manobi Bandyopadhyay are the two transgenders who prove that they are not any less than other two genders. Living Smile Vidya, also known as Smiley, is an Indian trans woman who is also an actress, assistant director, and writer from Chennai. She is a transgender activist and blogger. Her autobiography, I Am Vidya, A Transgender's Journey, which was written in Tamil and later translated into 7 different languages, including English, is regarded as one of the most brilliant transgender memoirs. It is the first transgender autobiography in India. Manobi Bandyopadhyay is the first transgender principal in India who was born as Somnath Bandyopadhyay. She holds a Ph.D. in Bengali literature and was previously an associate professor of Bengali at the Vivekananda Shatavarshiki Mahavidyalaya in Jhargram. In the year 2015, she became the first Indian transgender principal at Krishnanagar Women's College in Nadia district of West Bengal. Abhumanov, or The Subhuman, is the first Bengali transgender magazine that Bandyopadhyay started in the year 1995. Antohin Antorin Proshito Bhortika, or Endless Bondage, and The Third Gender in Bengali Literature are her 2 books. A Gift of Goddess Lakshmi is Manobi Bandyopadhyay's candid biography, where she tells her story of transformation from a man into a woman. The biography depicts the birth and life journey.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you have 2 more
Yes.
minutes left.
Okay.
You have, okay. Sum up.
The biography depicts the birth and life journey of Bandyopadhyay and the challenges and obstacles she had faced throughout her journey. Some recent changes in the gender construction are the rays of hope for the third gender. The 2014 verdict of the Supreme Court recognizing transgender as the third gender and providing reservations for them seems promising. People are so immersed in these dark thoughts of discrimination and oppression that they forgot that above all they are human, and humans are supposed to love each other. These things need to be abolished in order for the humanity to get uplifted. Everyone should be given equal opportunities, and one should be judged on the basis of his or her talent and merit. So, thank you. And here I end my presentation.
Thank you, Anisha Chatterjee, for this presentation of yours. You have quite successfully deliberated on caste, gender, and color prejudice. You talked about Mahesh Dattani's Tara, you talked about Bama, and transgenders also. There is just a little observation on my side. The very first slide that you showed, I think the last point of that particular slide contained a particular phrase. I quote that particular phrase. It was written something like this: low-born people were brutally tortured. Low-born people were brutally tortured.
Yes,
Actually, it struck me because I think that we are no one to give judgments. Now, who is a high-born or a low-born? We just need to rephrase it. We can write it in this way: people born in Dalit houses. That would be a better way of expressing it rather than writing low-born. No one is born low. Okay, so you need to just
Yes,
rephrase it. Okay.
Okay, sir.
If we have any questions, do we have any questions for Anisha?
Sir, I want to say something, sir.
Okay, Anindya.
Yes, sir. As you have suggested, that language plays a vital role in the representation of literature or so many other things. So, as you have stated that the people who are born in the Dalit families, you have stated, so this would be probably the correct representation. But low born, if we use that language, so it probably it is showing that we have already accepted that those people are in that way, because I got this realization from yesterday's session.
Okay, sir. Sir, I just thought that I will be conveying the thoughts that other people possess. So I thought that this is the thought of other people. So I wrote it in that way. So sorry, sir. I will keep that in mind.
No, it's not
There is
sorry.
nothing to be sorry about.
Yes, sir. Yes,
There's
sir.
nothing to be sorry about. It's a wonderful presentation, by the way, and love your confidence, the way you spoke. So thank you once again.
Thank you, sir, for the opportunity.
Welcome.
Thank you, Anisha.
So we would now like to move on to the next speaker.
Okay, next speaker we have Angana Shigda. I think she is here, and she is master degree student, University of Kalyani, and her topic is literature of marginality. Angana Shigda, please present your paper. Please unmute yourself first, and then
Angana, you can start your presentation, I suppose.
she's muted, sir. She can't. That's what I'm saying her to unmute herself.
Ask her if she can hear us.
Hello.
Yeah, you are audible now. Please present your paper.
Hello everyone. Good afternoon. I am Angana Shigda from University of Kalyani. I want to present my topic on the literature of marginality. So I start my paper presentation. Literature of marginality is the literature that deals with the marginalized class of the world who are kept devoid of their fundamental rights to participate in the social, religious, cultural, political, educational and economic spheres of their lives and are kept aloof, alienated or segregated physically from the general public called the sophisticated or elite classes of the world. They are the section of people who are deprived of equal opportunity, equal social status and equal individual dignity. Mulkraj Anand's novel Untouchable depicts a realistic picture of the downtrodden people. Bakha, the protagonist, stands as a representative for the downtrodden and the oppressed class. Along with Bakha, the other characters in the novel suffer due to the fact that they belong to the lower caste. The novel also presents a very bleak picture of the surroundings. In the course of the novel, we find how Bakha faces humiliation at every step of his life. Bakha is a toilet cleaner by his profession, the lower caste of people of his village, like in other parts of India, are restricted from even drawing water from the wells because it is considered by the upper caste that the water will be polluted if the lower caste people come near the well or touch its surface. Bakha is subjected to mental and physical torture by the upper caste people. Not just Bakha, his sister Sohini also suffers during the course of the novel. Sohini goes to the well to draw water, but she herself cannot touch the surface of the well because she belongs to lower caste. So she waits for somebody from the upper caste to come and fetch water for her. Pandit Kalinath comes and invites her to his home under the pretext of getting the courtyard clean and tries to molest her. When Sohini shouts for help and attempts to move away, Pandit Kalinath turns the table on her by claiming that she, untouchable, tried to touch her. Bakha arrives on the scene and sends her sister away. Later he goes to his father and complains to him that the people treat him like dirt because they clean the dirt, and he wonders for how long this will go on. He also hopes that once they stop cleaning the dirt, their situation will also change. The same afternoon, Bakha attends the marriage of Ramcharan's sister, whom he loved once but could not marry due to their class difference. Later in the evening, Bakha goes to play hockey match at Habildar Charat Singh's place. In the midst of the game, a little boy is wounded and Bakha tries to help him, but he is rebuked by the boy's mother for having polluted her son. Bakha feels extremely frustrated and dejected. Bakha had purchased the mouth-watering jalebis and is lost in enjoying the taste of eating a portion of jalebis when he unconsciously touches the tunic of a upper caste Hindu who immediately starts shouting and insulting him. He calls Swain cock-eyed son of a bow-legged scorpion to Baka. Baka is humiliated but helpless and remains silent at this situation. Anand captures the predicament of the untouchable and presents a harsh reality. The novelist is indeed quite powerful in his rendering of the plight of the untouchables with his accurate observation. These novels records the day events in Baka's life which serve as a mirror to the pathetic condition of the untouchables. Mulk Raj Anand's another novel, Kuli, is a devastating account of the poverty and the exploitation faced by Munno. It highlights the struggle of the survival of downtrodden of the society. Munno has no real control over his life, over the work he does, or where he lives, or how he is treated. Is the novel that narrates the story of a 14-year-old boy Munno from the hills of Kangra, Bilaspur. Munno's parents died when he was very young. He was brought up by his uncle and aunt. However, early in the novel, they reveal that they can no longer support Munno and insist that he should earn for his survival. Munno moves from the village to the town, from the town to city, and then up to the mountains. This journey marks the end of his childhood. Munno travels to a nearby town with his uncle, where he finds a job as a servant to a bank clerk, Babu Nathuram. Nathuram's wife Bibiji exploits Munno, but he too bears abuses and curses. As he has no option, he works hard in the house, washing dishes, bringing vegetables, and cleaning them to Munno gets ill treatment from Bibiji. One day, Munno accidentally bites Sheila, the daughter of Nathuram. Munno is beaten and he decides to run away. In his new journey, he meets Prabha Dayal, a kind person who promises him to take Daulatpur and give him a job in his factory. Munno does not know where to go and what to do. He has to do something for his survival. He immediately accepts the proposal. Prabha and his wife are kind to Munno. Prabha's wife soon grows fond of him and gives him motherly love. Munno feels relaxed but soon has to face another tragedy. Unfortunately, Prabha's own business partner Ganpat cheats him and leaves him bankrupt. Prabha decides to leave the town and go to his native place. Once again, Munno remains alone and alienated. After the departure of the Prabha and his family, again Munno remains alone and alienated. Munno is left alone in the world with no art or craft to earn his living. Munno has to face starvation. He tries to satisfy the hunger. He stands as a beggar in the row in front of the temple. In Daulatpur, Munno starts his new job as a coolie, but he never gets success because of the license and the social system. He faces obstacles everywhere. He tries hard to settle, but the system would not allow him to live peacefully. When Munno arrives in Bombay, at first Munno is delighted with Bombay, but he soon realizes that everywhere police must sleep on the streets. While wandering the streets, he is run over everywhere. He is run over everywhere by Miss Mainwaring's car. As compensation, she hires him as a servant.
Angana, sorry to interrupt you, but it's almost 6 minutes over, so you have 2 minutes to sum up your paper. Please conclude.
Okay. While wandering the streets, in the house, he works as a servant and pulls her rickshaw. But despite the kindness that Miss Mainwaring shows him, Munno contracts tuberculosis and dies. And Arundhati Roy's another novel, The God of Small Things, also deals with the Dalit issues. It narrates us the story of an intense but doomed love affair between high-caste Syrian Christian woman Ammu and the untouchable Paravan Bheluta. Because Bheluta belongs to untouchable Paravan, so he faces a humiliation. And he he also beaten and dead in police custody. In God of Small Things, we find that Velu's alliance with the Communist Party failed to provide him the opportunity to defend himself. Um, and the God of Small Things deals with the miserable plights of untouchable Dalit through the example of Veluta, the protagonist. And Toni Morrison's novel The Bluest Eye is an account of the damaging influence of white standards on the lips of Black Americans. The novel is about a poor black girl called Piccola Bridla. She is the victim of white culture, racial culture. So she is driven insane as she fails to meet the standards of white culture. Um, Another A Room of One's Own is an extended essay by Virginia Woolf, first published in September 1921. And this essay also deals with the miserable plight of the women. Women are also the marginalized class of the world. And the A Room of One's Own is a Woolf's conception that a woman must have money and a room on her own if she is to write fiction. In A Room of One's Own, Judith is a fictional character, and here Woolf shows how Judith is tortured and betrothed by her family, and by the character of Judith, Woolf here shows the miserable plight of women. And another a vindication of the rights of women is another feminist writing which also deals with feminist philosophy and and the response to those education and political theories of the 18th century who believed that women should not receive a rational education. And another, Simon de Beauvoir's The Second Sex is one of the earliest attempts to confront human history from a feminist perspective.
Angona, you have to sum up.
Yeah,
You have
yes,
to sum up. So
yes,
try to sum up as soon as possible. Okay.
yes,
We are running out of time. Sum up.
Beauvoir's primary goal is to prove that how at each stage of her upbringing a girl is conditioned into accepting passivity, dependence, repetition, and inwardness. Every force in society conspires to deprive her of subjectivity and flatten into an object. It means the woman or black in Americans or Dalit are all marginalized class of world. They are the victims of the exploited condition by those above them. So it is my paper presentation, and I include all the example. So that is thank you so much.
Thank you, Angana. Thank you, Angana. Yeah. Under the topic literature of marginality, you have thrown light on caste, gender with regards to God of Small Things and Bluest Eye. Also bringing in the works of Mulk Raj Anand, A Room of One's Own, Simone de Beauvoir's Second Sex. Now, it was an exhaustive kind of a list that you took up for this particular presentation. Now, I think rather we should congratulate you on this particular topic and open the session for questions if we have any questions for Angana.
Yes, yes. No, there is no question in no question, no question.
Acha, Angana is very happy that she has no questions to answer. So I think we should move on. Thank you, Angana. Once again, we should move on to the next speaker then.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Next, we move on to our next speaker.
Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Our next speaker is Animesh Bagh, Assistant Professor of English at Das College, Kolkata, and his topic is The Birth of a Legal Subject, Exploring the Politics of Class in 19th Century Colonial Bengal. Sir, please start.
Okay, So, am I audible now?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. Let me just very briefly introduce myself. I am Animesh Bag, Assistant Professor and HOD, KK Das College at KK Das College, Kolkata. I have completed my MPhil from Vishwabharati and now I'm pursuing my PhD at Jadavpur University. I'm going to talk about the politics of class in 19th century colonial Bengal. Uh, and the position of legal subjecthood. So that was the title of my paper, The Birth of a Legal Subject, Exploring the Politics of Class in 19th Century Colonial Bengal. I'll start with a quote of John Bender. He writes, literature and art are usually considered to be effects rather than causes of social institutions. This is precisely the theory of reflection I wish to avoid. But I hope the reader will come to see that I'm not cruelly adopting its mirror stage. I consider that there is certain particular sense in which the novel enabled the penitentiary by formulating and thereby giving conscious access to a real texture of attitudes, a structure of feeling. So my article addresses the fundamental discursive discontinuity of legal subjecthood in the late 19th century colonial Bengal, particularly after 1860. Although India was under colonial rule after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, its emergence as a colonial state in modern sense took place only after the Crown rule in 1858 and the subsequent introduction of Indian Penal Code in 1860. So it made all the citizens of colonial India subjected to punishment for committing any offense as declared by the law. The codified law therefore represents the Western modernity, which ensures a departure from the class and caste-based Indian punishment system. However, the prevailing social determinism was gradually normalized into legal discourse as it was filtered through the structure of racial prejudice, fear of nationalist insurgency, and the stereotypical colonial knowledge production. The Concomitant Criminal Tribes Act in 1871, which mentions a category of born criminal, including the lower caste and the lower class people, legally transformed them into a bodily determined subject of having criminal tendencies. So this paper argues that this process of making a bad legal subject is twofold. Firstly, the colonial governmentality that works as an structural agent, and secondly, and most importantly, the literary writings that play as an extensive constructive force of cultural formation. The paper therefore engages into the discursive role of class and caste, which was instrumental in fostering the binary of good legal subject and the violent bad legal subject in the late 19th century colonial Bengal through a rereading of particularly two literary writings, Bengali literary writings, I should say, Kedarnath Datta's Sachitra Guljarnagar and Dakkinaranjan Chattopadhyay, Jail Dapan. John Bender, in his seminal work, Imagining the Penitentiary, Fiction and the Architecture of Mind in 19th century England, argues that the narrative literature and visual art bring change and develop social institutions simultaneously, like penitentiary in England. Continuing in that line, the article shows that literary works in colonial Bengal, Sachitra Guljarnagar and Jadavpur, are just a part of it, produced a biased parallel dichotomy of Bhadralok and Chotolok and established a dominant upper class hegemony, mainly through the narrative centered on criminal activity and British punishment in jail. The author's gauge therefore contributes to this making of a legal subject. Now, if we look at the history of this particular time, I think many fascinating things would be revealed. Although it cannot be said at when the Bengali educated class shifted to forming their own distinctive legal identity, but it was loosely after the institutionalization of law, the narrative of legal subjecthood of the elite class, ethically away from violence and criminal tendency, had to be rewritten. The egalitarian rule of law, initially for them, was a practical and moral solution to the company's whimsical rules and the revenue extraction policy. The colonialists, on the other hand, strengthened their power of control under the rhetoric of good governance and the affirmation of law and order in civil society against the ongoing criminal activities owing to social mobilization and railway expansion. They provided legitimacy and rationality of the crown rule by identifying the criminal section of the society to keep the society at large protected. But under this legal equality discourse, the superiority the upper caste, mostly urban-lived English-educated Babus had been historically enjoying, powered by the hegemonic Hindu Brahmanical law, became susceptible. The colonial legal discourse decategorizes the prior privileged subject position of the Bhadralok. Therefore, this intrinsic category of subjecthood and sovereign had to be developed in the negation of the construction of Chotolok, the class who were at the bottom of social hierarchy with an inherent capacity of not to be a good legal subject. Thus, the main contention of my paper is to lay bare the dual role of literature in relation to the antithetical cultural schema to the lower class people. Here, I have mainly introduced two theoretical premises. First of all, Benedict Anderson's imagined community, where he had claimed how the rise of print capitalism introduced some sort of nationalist sentiment in all over the world, although which is undoubtedly opened up many controversies and many scholarly reinterpretation. But I think this is somehow true in colonial perspective too, because the rise of print capitalism, particularly in colonial Bengal, somehow fueled up a new possibility of interrogating the colonial oppression at times. Just like Augustus Hickey, Johann Jacques, or Pancharan Karmakar in 18th century, or the vernacular printing houses like Amrita Bajar Potrika, Bamabodhini Potrika, and not to mention the Bottola literature in 19th century, played a critical role in it. And the second premises, theoretical premises, I should say, I have used is the concept of public sphere of Jugendhabermas. Jugendhabermas basically said that in 18th century Britain and 19th century colonial Bengal, the public spaces like Adda, Boitok, coffee house became a new locale of public discourse, where people could extend their view and exchange their information free from societal control. So such spaces therefore emerged as an extension of literary and print culture, which took part in forming political argument and action. In considering this role instrument of cultural change, I would now let's get back to literature, our main contention of this paper. The first of all is Kedarnath Datta's Sachitra Guljar logo. If we see the very title of its paper, you can see that here the very word Sachitra, that means with picture, imparts a sense of visualization or picturization, which itself proclaims its realist approach beforehand. And this is the satirical piece published in 1871, written in the similar fashion of Kali Prasanna Singh Hutum Pachan Noksha, published in 1861. But
sorry to interrupt you, sir. You have two more minutes left.
Okay. Let me just very briefly pointing out those two particular piece of work, what has to offer us. Now, in Sachitra Guljar Nagar typically presents a society divided in two categories: upper class civilized society and underworld degenerated dark world, crowded by mostly Chotolok. As this particular piece of work said. In the novel, people like Madhai, Phalna, or Gokulu were terrified human beings, often known for their theft, murder, looting innocent people, for their addiction of gambling and opium. Here, interestingly, Datta does not try to understand their violent psychology, or even to explore any offshoot their social discrimination. Even for a small section of people becomes a signifier of entire lower class people identity as a communal group. Then there are some women figures also. And very briefly, I just mentioned that these women, we can easily perceive, have been represented as the antithesis of the educated middle class women called Bhadra Mohila. Thus, they, in Datta's typical imagination, appears as the subject of the uncivilized society, remain outside the women emancipation in the 19th century Bengal, which we call Bengal Renaissance. By implication of their activity, the novel produces a narrative of criminal mindset of these lower class people, including women who are thought of having tender nature. Unlike respected class, they have been familiar with police, jail, court, and even used to endure punishment. The conscious representation of two completely different worlds that hardly interact with each other pushes the notion of Bhadralok far away from the legal discourse. Even if they sometimes got caught in turmoil, this is just an inner burden. I think I don't have much time to get into those two texts in more vivid way. Let me just very briefly gloss through the second piece of literature in my paper is Alakananda Chakraborty Jadavpur, written in 1875, which in similar fashion also talks about lower class people involved in criminal activities, they are punishing in jail and all that. Even this is the piece where which is mostly focused on two types of jail: Fauzdari jail and Diwani jail, and this is very intricate in trope, I think, and it it typically represents how the two types of caste and how the two types of class are treated differently. Even Brahmin who are complaining against the existing penal punishment system and demanded for separate rules from Brahmin and the low caste people. So now I think the time has almost comes to the end. So I'm concluding now with this particular note, with a brief theoretical understanding of this whole scenario. René Girard in his book, The Scapegoat talks about the human mimetic desire for power, which leads to the possibility of serious societal confrontation. It is at this point of paroxysm when scapegoat mechanism is triggered. A person or a group is marked and singled out as the root of the trouble and is expelled or killed by the dominant people. The social order is restored as people are contented that they have solved the cause of their problem by removing the scapegoat to the individual, and the cycle begins again. This mechanism, I think, can provide the basis of this perverse rationale of criminal tendency against the lower class people in colonial Bengal. The British legal discourse delimited the privileged legal subjecthood of Bhadralok, and the threat of usurping from the power hierarchy required to scapegoating a lower class people as the violent legal subject. It is not that this process of making an image of criminal is one-dimensional. The previous experience of Thuggy and dacoit influenced the Oriental knowledge production, which merged with racial predetermination. The public sphere, which had an immense impact of producing a narrative, was typically governed by educated class. And the Bhadralok space not only seized out the lower class and caste people, also made the hegemonic representation, which has been reflected in the literary discourse, as the true cultural reflection of 19th century also. So, Sochitra Guljan Nagar and Jadavpur are just two examples of 19th century, which I couldn't talk about much, was consciously produces a narrative of criminality only related to lower class people. So here I stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Onweshwar, for focusing on the good legal subject and the bad legal subject in the 19th century. It was quite brief and informative. We wanted to listen to you more, but since we have time constraints, so we couldn't, sorry. You also dealt with how the codified laws of Britishers mark a departure from the class and caste-based Indian punishment system. It was a wonderful presentation. Hope to meet you again in some of the webinars that we will be conducting someday. Thank you. Thank you once again. Now, I invite students if they have any questions for Professor Onweshwar. Students, if you have any questions for Professor Onweshwar. I think, sir, you don't have any questions as of now. Thank you once again from our side for presenting this wonderful paper. Thank you. Now I'd request our student coordinators to move on to our next speaker.
Okay, sir. Our next presenter is Mahua Sarkhel, student MA in English Literature and Language, Rishi Chandra College, and her topic is Impact of Poverty in Premchand's The Shroud. Mahua, please.
Thank you, Medha, for introducing me. Uh, let me start then. My topic is the impact of poverty in Premchand's writing, with special reference to the shroud. The term Dalit literally means crushed or grounded, and it describes the living conditions for centuries of a large group of people in India. Now the term refers to any member of a large group of socially oppressed people in India. The emphasis is laid on the group's social exclusion, as they were proclaimed untouchables by the lawgivers of the traditional Varna system. Quite naturally, they have been made to do menial and dirty jobs, often very hard and toilsome. Thus, for centuries, these people have been economically exploited, socially discriminated against, culturally marginalized. In recent years, the meaning of the term has been extended to include all those who are oppressed and marginalized. The doctrine of rebirth in Hindu religion does not only sanction untouchability, but even prescribed and justifies it under the idea of karma. The scriptural sanction and justification provided by the Hindu lawgivers led Dalits to accept their fate without demur, resulting in a state of mental servility. Dr. Pashupati Prasad Mahato, an eminent anthropologist and vice president of Bengali Dalit Sahitya Sanstha, states the consequences of disposition led them to poverty, exploitation, oppression, and dehumanization, culminating into cultural silence uh, that debilitates and destroys not only personality but also cultural excellence and creative genius. In All India Progressive Writers Congress held at Lucknow on April 10, 1930, Munshi Premchand delivered his lecture on the nature and purpose of literature. There he stated, quotation, literature can best be defined as a criticism of life. The literature of our immediate past had nothing to do with actuality. Our writers were living in the world of dreams and were writing things like Fanasi Ajaib or Chandrakanta, tales told only for entertainment or to satisfy our sense of wonder. Life and literature were considered to be two different things which bore no relation to each other. Literature reflects the age. In the past days of decadence, the main function of literature was to entertain the parasitic class. In this literature, the dominant notes were either sex or mysticism, pessimism or fatalism. It was divided to vigor, originality, and even power of observation. The literature which does not arouse in us a critical spirit or satisfy our spiritual and intellectual needs, which is not force-giving and dynamic, which does not awaken our sense of beauty, which does not make us face the grim realities of life in a spirit of determination, has no use of us today. It cannot be termed as literature. This is Premchand's reason behind his realistic writings. He also talked about how a writer should be. The more a writer develops this sense of beauty through his observation of nature, the more effective will his writing become. All that is ugly and detestable, all that is inhuman becomes intolerable to such a writer. He becomes the standard bearer of humanity, of moral uprightness, of nobility. It becomes his duty to help all those who are downtrodden, oppressed, and exploited, individuals or groups, and to advocate their cause. And his judge is society itself. It is before society that he brings his plaint. In the mid of Premchand's career, he turned for his inspiration to the village world, which would become the richest subject of his best work. Caste snobbery, uh, crushing poverty, and brutal exploitation by landowners, moneylenders, and parasitical Brahmins. The overwhelming desire for sons to carry on the family and perform the rituals, the terror at the possibility of disgrace, loss of face and ostracism, the shame of widowhood, the proverbial conservatism and cunning of the peasants. These are recurring stands in fabric of Premchand's portrayal of life. These themes are present in his short stories like The Shroud, Deliverance, and others. Coffin or The Shroud is one of several Premchand stories that sympathetically considers Dalit social degeneration in rural Indian society, an innovation for modern Indian literature in the early decades of 20th century. Coffin is about two Dalit characters, Gisu and Madhav, a father and his son, both from the Chamar class. When the story opens, Gisu and Madhav sitting outside the small hut eating roasted potatoes and trying to ignore the screams of Madhav's wife inside, who is dying in childbirth. Neither will go inside to see her out of a certain amount of shame, and each also fears that the other will guzzle down more than his fair share of potatoes. Finally, bellies full, they lie down and sleep in front of the dying fire. When Madhav's wife Budhya and a stillborn child are found dead in the morning, Gisu and Madhav set out begging for the money to pay for the wood and shroud required for the cremation. They managed to collect 5 rupees and arrange the wood for the cremation, but bulk at spending the rest of their money on a shroud that will only be burned up with the body. Instead, they spend the money on liquor and fried snacks. And as they become more and more drunk, they alternately praises Madhav's wife for her gift of abundance after the death and bemoan her difficult and joyless life. The story ends with the father-son drinking themselves into oblivion, abandoning the pretense of providing for the final rites of Budhya's corpse. These two are the laziest people of the village. They lived a society where these two labored night and day, were not in a better position than these two. Therefore, they accepted their
Mahua, you need to sum up
starvation.
now.
In such a society, the birth of such mentality was no cause for surprise. Kisu was determined that hard work would not bring them a full stomach. It would be better to carry one life with laziness. They are not actually lazy, but their realization about the caste-based Hindu society, where no matter what they do, they will always be oppressed, is the reason behind the acceptance of poverty, and it is the poverty which made them inhuman. However, it becomes very difficult to condemn Gisu and Madhav for their inhumanity towards Budhya. But one must remember that mourning is a luxury a starving man cannot afford. Quotation, their callousness is a reflection of their helplessness, not their inhumanity. Gisu remarks, if they have 5 rupees earlier, they would have bought her some medicine. His remarks makes one realize that it was the tragic death of Budhya which enabled them to collect 5 rupees, and had she been alive and wailing in pain, the same people who contributed for the preparation of the last rites would have turned their back, because the sufferer was a Dalit and did not belong to the social structure. However, there are some writers who criticizes Kafan as an anti-Dalit text. Dalit writer like Saroj Singh considers that It is far from the realism and completely an imaginative story to prove that Dalits are not human. And the purpose of this story is to portray the totally distorted picture of a Dalit community. Um, Kanwal Bharati in other article writes Kafan is an anti-Dalit story because it is made mockery of the Dalit thoughts, its characters who have been portrayed insensitive and inhuman. In conclusion, we can easily perceive the factor of class, caste, and economy to be interrelated. It's essential to note how the untouchables of this, as well as his other stories, are poor and how their caste plays an important role in subjugating their financial stability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahua. I think Premchand is famous for his village level realism, and Mahua has very successfully thrown light on the poverty of the anti-heroes behind the inhumanity. And she has successfully deliberated on the causes of the inhumanity rather than their caste, I suppose. In fact, most of us, while we go through Premchand's The Shroud, if you read the Hindi version of this particular story, people tend to think that this is related to caste or something like that. But if you go a bit deeper into it, in fact, Dalit critics have also criticized the story on the grounds that it paints an unfaltering and hostile pictures of two anti-heroes who are explicitly identified as chamars. But of course, throughout the story, these two are repeatedly and emphatically depicted as unique, as isolated characters. In fact, caste does not matter here. They are seen as isolated individuals. Their behavior and attitudes are described as peculiar to them alone. So irrespective of the caste to which they belong to, everybody else in the story of every caste or social level finds them contemptible. So the idea that the story embodies or expresses prejudice against Dalits doesn't seem plausible, actually. And I'm really thankful to Mahua for focusing on the poverty that leads to the inhuman activities that they do. Thank you, Mahua, once again for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Do we have any questions for Mahua?
No, sir, there are no questions in the chat box, and I think there is no question as a whole. So, I think.
Okay, so we move on to the next speaker.
Okay, then we are moving on to the next speaker. Our next presenter is Anvesha Basu, Ph.D. research scholar, the Maharaja Sarojirao University of Baroda, Gujarat. And the topic is Politics of Power, Exploring Center and the Margin, and investigation of the little margins in 20th century America.
Yeah, thank you.
Please start.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So I would like to begin. Little magazine includes poetry, reviews, short stories, essays, dramas, and other various literary writings are often printed as periodicals to focus on the promulgation of the unheard voices. Little magazines are avant-garde and non-commercial in nature, serves as a cultural intermediaries, a medium of expression, and a literary space, mediatory between the political, social, and the literary dimensions. Christine McLeod article, American Little Magazine of the 1890s and the Rise of the Professional Managerial Class discusses the major magazine revolution during the 1890s in America, which led to the emergence of the magazines popularly known as the fad magazines or the faddiness. The commentaries that were present in the little magazines influenced the middle order of the American society. She categorizes magazines into three forms: aesthetic little magazines, which primarily focused on the literary and artistic works; periodicals or protests, which focused on the political and social concerns of the American society in a particular movement; and hybrid magazine, which emphasized not only on the artistic and the literary works, but also on the political and social upheavals of the people. In the fields of magazine, Americans were the first to publish their articles in the form of magazine named the Yale Review 1819, the oldest literary journal published by the Wiley Blackwell, which is still in print. The other magazines are New York Quarterly, poetry, a magazine of verse, literary review, etc. The advent of publication by an Afro-American in America began in the year 1827 by Reverend Peter Williams, who is contemplated as the owner of the first Afro-American magazine named Freedom Journal, with a motive to unveil the contemporary issues of slavery and colonization. It is believed that the origin of newspapers was during the time of crisis, whereas the origin of the Afro-American magazines was during the time of economic development for the cultural endorsement and expansion. The period between World War I and Great Depression was an opportunity for many Afro-Americans to migrate towards North, especially to Harlem, for the South, to reconstruct and establish their identity among the whites and free themselves from being marginalized. Gradually, there was an emergence of black-tone magazines, which included The Crisis, a journal of W.E.B. Du Bois, which launched the career of Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hudson, and many other literary figures. The other magazines being Opportunity, The Messenger, and Fire. Identity is formed at an unstable point where the unspeakable stories of subjectivity meet the narratives of history of a culture, quotes Stuart Hall. He constructs the notion of identity in a structuralist manner by positioning it in a negative framework to demonstrate a positive outlook. Identity thereby constructs itself through the interaction with the society. He relates the identity with race and culture. Identity has two dimensions in terms of social and personal. Social identity refers to a set of characteristic features imbibed in the society by cultural and historical factors, which a person marks and distinguishes oneself. The other one is a personal identity, where a person feels privileged and prideful of having similar features to the society or culture. The Afro-Americans who were at the margin in the pursuit of being considered equal to the whites, the ones at the center in all the socio-cultural and economic aspects, went through an identity crisis on migrating towards the north, essentiating among the Afro-Americans a dire need to establish their identity, to place themselves at the center. Power in culture plays an important role in construction of an identity. Viewing the other from the marginal terms, they are all ignored because with power, position, and status, the center does not view the others at the periphery as an important, except within limited economical and political cultural boundaries. The power at the center represents the others as a subaltern. Antonio Gramsci, in his theory of hegemony, describes of being influenced by Karl Marx and agrees to the concept of capitalism of Marx, but rejects the notion of dominant people being powered only due to economic power. Karl Marx talks about class struggle and describes how a society can be analyzed from the economical system existing within the society. According to him, everything in a society is determined by the capital, where the dominant class forms the rules and regulations and holds power over the working class. For Gramsci, a class struggle relates to the ideas and ideology which will create a revolution. Gramsci introduces a new concept which involves ideology, which describes the dominant class or the ruling class at the center held power, as they had the power to introduce their own system of rules and regulation, thereby manipulating and brainwashing the others at the periphery. Louis Althusser, a Marxist philosopher, in his essay Ideology and Ideological State Apparatus, Notes Towards an Investigation, 1970, talks about ideology and correlates it to the Marxist theory. According to him, the ruling or the dominant class reproduce the labor power and the means of production. In his essay, he talks about RSA, Repressive State Apparatuses, and ISA, Ideological State Apparatus. In RSA, the ruling class at the center, in order to dictate and control the subordinate class or the subalterns, uses RSA. The ruling class holds the power of the state, which is at the center in the economical, social, and cultural field of the society, and uses force, violent or inviolent, to dominate the others at the margin. While in the ISA, it uses the ideological tools such as churches, schools, etc. to influence the minds of the subordinate class through the lens of ideology. The implementation, in the words of Louis Althusser, seeks to reproduce the relations of productions and train the young minds to join the labor forces and work for and under the ruling class at the center. In the 1920s, popularly known as the Harlem Renaissance, the whites at the center held power in America and used both RSA and ISA to reproduce the labor force dwelling at the margin, that is, the Afro-Americans. The Afro-Americans wished emancipation from slavery and create an identity for themselves. Thereby, they looked forward to voicing their opinions and anguished through the little magazines. These little magazines were the medium for the Afro-Americans at the periphery to feel liberated from the center and relocate oneself to the center of the American society from the margin. Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, in her essay Can the Subaltern Speak, talks about the historical and the ideological factors that hinder the opportunity of the people from being heard who reside in the periphery. And I quote, the subject production of worker and unemployed within the national state ideologies are in its center. The increasing subtraction of the working class in the periphery from the realization of the surplus value and thus humanistic training in consumerism, and the large-scale presence of the para-capitalist labor, as well as the heterogeneous structural status of the agriculture at the periphery. Thinking about the little magazines of the Afro-Americans, the intellectual writers and the Afro-Americans were mainly the working class, a puppet to the center whose voices were unheard and they were treated badly. They inhabited the periphery or at the margin where, when viewed from the social and economical terms. If we look at the history of the publication of little magazines of the Afro-Americans like Fire, Opportunity and others, we would notice that most of them were short-lived for the paucity of the support, funding and response, while on the other hand, the little magazines of the Americans, Poetry, Magazine of the Words, Little Review, Yale Review, and others were long-lived as they were produced by the people at the center. They had funding which supported the printing production, unlike the little magazines of the Afro-Americans. The core reason the Afro-Americans began publishing the little magazines was to reassert their identity in the American literature and culture and to prove that they were no less in terms of intellectual.
Sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. You have 2 more minutes left.
Yeah, thank you. But the whites were powerful in the 1920s and controlled the American society. They made sure that the little magazines of the Afro-Americans were not circulated in the society and create an upheaval. Their publications were pushed in the periphery, which meant that the Afro-Americans were considered as others. Annie Helen's Christus, Du Bois and the Crisis magazine, Imaging Women and Family, an article in 2005, and Susan W. Churchill's article Youth Culture in the Crisis and Fire 2010 highlights how the little magazines were used as a political tool apart from being the literary tool. If we look at the publication process back in the 20th century from the lens of Edward Say's and Homi Bhabha's concept of others, we can relocate that the little magazines of the Afro-Americans at the margin of the society were deemed to be others by the ones at the center of the American society. The center held power and focused on creating, in quotes, an alternative form of cultural capital in relation to mainstream magazines, also aiming at expanding nationally and internationally instead of promoting the little magazines of the subalterns to support them. To conclude, we can see how the Americans who were at the center held power and controlled the Afro-Americans when viewed explicitly through the lens of the theorist in terms of publication, as well as how they created an impact on the minds apart from spawning pain and hardship in the lives of the Afro-Americans overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Anisha. It is nice to see you after a long time.
Yes.
You have quite successfully discussed the reasons that led to the publication of the Little Magazine. And you have also dealt in length at the publication of Little Magazine and how it brought to the surface issues like marginalization, subjugation, alienation, and exploitation issues. I think this is an area that I too learned from you about this Little Magazine. It was a wonderful presentation, a very confident presentation from your side. So now the session is open for questions. I would invite participants if they have any questions for Anisha. I don't think they have any questions. So I would request, thank you, Anisha, once again. I would request our students coordinator to kindly move on with the next speaker.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Our next speaker is Argho Basu, Assistant Professor, Department of BES, Netaji Subhash Engineering College, and his paper's title is Of Narrative Space and Resistance, Understanding the Heterotopian Framework in Meena Kandaswamy's When I Hit You. Please start your presentation, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Thank you so much. I'll switch off the video and I've got a video, PPT presentation. I'll switch it on. Just a second, please. So I've got 8 minutes time, I guess, and I'll try to make as much sense as I can as my potential suits it to be. My paper is entitled Of Narrative Space and Resistance, Understanding the Heterotopian Design in Meena Kandaswamy's When I Hit You. On the very onset, let me tell you that Meena Kandaswamy's When I Hit You is arguably an autofiction. There's a lot of detail about what an autofiction is in the Wikipedia. I've copied it from there only, so you can read it for yourself if you want to. 2 points that I'd like to make out here is that there are 2 features that are basically associated with the very notion of autofiction. That is, it's a first-person narrative, and the narrator has got the name of the author. They share the same name. To our advantage, in When I Hit You, the narrator is unnamed. As you can understand, that autofiction is a portmanteau term, basically combining 2 words, autobiography and fiction, that are mutually inconsistent precisely because of the reason that in an autobiography, you're expected to talk about the truth, whereas in fiction, you tend to make things up. Though it's not that simplistic, but still, for our basic understanding, let us go about this. There's been a lot of argument regarding the use of the term autofiction in literary world. For reviewers and critics, it has been like they took a liberty at using this particular term and assigning them to authors. Philip Roth suffered the most for the Zuckerman character that frequently appears in his fiction. And in a retort, he said this, I quote, "People constantly change their story. We are writing fictitious versions of our lives all the time, contradictory but mutually entangling stories that, however subtly or grossly falsified, constitute our hold on reality and are the closest thing we have to truth." And this thing happens. This reminds me of a narrative that is there in Sense of an Ending by Julian Burns as well. Let's move on to the next part. As far as my understanding goes, autofiction, this generic fiction, particularly is a postmodern generic fiction, the postmodern generic term for that matter. And as far as postmodern fictions are considered, we bring in a lot of issues with postmodern fiction, and we tend to ascribe a lot of characteristic features to postmodern fiction. And this is the list. This too is from Wikipedia. Thanks again. And the sections that are marked in bold and red, these are the elements that are basically there in Kandaswamy's When I Hit You. Now, what I'm trying to understand out here, till this point of time, I've hardly got anything to contribute that is my own. Okay, I've copied things from here and from there. There comes my idea. Now, these are the research papers, some of the research papers that are already published and quite established in this genre, because it has been roughly around 5 years the book has been there. The papers talk about, if you just read the titles of the research paper, you'll see that feminist study, an exploration of sexual violence and marital rapes, marriage and women, violated bodies, unconventional woman, critique of regimentation. So if you look at it, you'll see that there is a tendency in the ongoing research to understand the text as a grand narrative, okay? What the text represents as a whole. What I personally believe that when you are getting into the notion of a postmodern fiction, you are doing injustice if you're trying to look at the text from perspective of a grand narrative. Because as Lyotard has already said, that grand narrative is something that we have to do away with if we are to look into life as postmodern as it can be. So what I'm trying to say is that these existing research papers, though they are brilliant in their own spirit and quality, tend to look at the text from a general structure, and the general structure usually looks away from the peripheral narratives that are there within the text. I'll talk about the peripheral narratives in greater detail in a while. Hence, I take resort of this particular term called heterotopias. As you can understand, that heterotopia again is a combined word of 2 particular segments, hetero and topos. Hetero means different and topos means space, as you have seen in cases of utopia and dystopia. So if you're familiar with the notions of utopias and dystopias, you must be knowing that we call a narrative utopian or a space utopian or a space dystopian looking at a general characteristics. But within a dystopian or an utopian structure, even if the fact that it's a generally utopian or generally dystopian notion, there are certain elements or smaller narrative spaces that are different from the existing grand space. I'll give you a simple example. If you look at George Orwell's 1984, if you remember the character Winston as well, then you'll see that in Winston's room, there is a small table right next to the giant screen where there was Big Brother, keeping a constant eye on him. He was under vigilance. But on that particular table, he used to maintain a notebook where he used to write things that was basically forbidden in that particular kingdom. Now, that particular space with the table, the notebook, and then Winston, who's trying to write something down, is a space that is in direct contrast to the general notion and spirit of the text. That is the dystopian spirit. That particular space is a different space. That is a heterotopia. The idea of heterotopia is basically talked about by Michel Foucault in the preface to his Order of Things, the book. Basically, it was an audio lecture initially. Later on, he did not feel, have enough impetus to develop on the idea. But one part that I highlighted is that the heterotopias try to destroy the syntax. It tells you not to name something in the beginning in general. Try to acknowledge the rest of it as well. I believe the heterotopian structure is true for narratives as well, precisely because of the reason, if we look at the narrative as an amalgamation of broken fragments, then we take into narratives, as this webinar is about marginalization, we bring in narratives that are marginal. We bring in all the narratives into consideration. To give you a head start, this is what happens in the novel that I am planning to talk about. A young, liberal, promising woman falls in love with a charming literature professor and reluctantly ends up in a disastrous conjugal relationship, only to fight her way out of it after 4 months. What started as a possessive and coquettish alliance soon suffers the clatters of broken utensils, cramps of countless smacks, and shrieks of contorted soul. Her furtive movements in a home weaponized with everyday appliances, from the hose of a washing machine to the power cord of a laptop, unsettles you to the core. The abusive perversion turns a fresh leaf as the husband whites out her digital footprint and leaves her with a markedly limited access to the internet. The novel does not serve justice to the woman as the miscreant finally escapes to start his life afresh. But eventually a bell of cathartic bliss chimes when she realizes that she is the woman of myth and bullshit who is not afraid to face her reality anymore. This novel, as you can understand from this narrative, is about 4 months, and it talks about a very small scope in the protagonist or the narrator's life. This is a structure that I have generated. I believe that usually the ongoing criticism and narrative about the text or the understanding of the narratives goes on a grand narrative structure level. That is the central part of this diagram. That talks about the regressive cultural practices, patriarchal oppressions, feminist liberation, resistance, and so on and so forth. But I believe there are other marginal narrative elements, small spaces of marginal narratives, marginal heterotopias that should be brought into account for practice. I know I've got 2 more minutes.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you, but
I've got 2 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Yeah, together. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So I'm trying to talk about these smaller heterotopian constructs, how they contribute in the formation of the grand structure and simultaneously denounce the grand structure. I'll talk about one particular aspect because it's not possible for me to talk about all the heterotopian structure in general right now, where the narrator writes love letters, imaginary love letters, because she is basically confiscated within a house and or stripped of our internet privileges. She cannot access internet. All she's left with a laptop where she writes these letters, and this is what she writes. I write letters to lovers I have never seen or heard, to lovers who do not exist, to lovers I invent on lonely morning. Open a file, write a paragraph or a page, erase before lunch. The sheer pleasure of being able to write something that my husband can never access. The revenge in writing the words lover again and again and again. The knowledge that I can do it, that I can get away with doing it. The defiance, the spite, the eagerness to rub salt on his wounded pride. Now, this is the form of resistance we are talking about. Usually, the understanding of feminist resistance is not reciprocated out there in the novel. If you read the novel, you'll realize that this novel is not about the resistance that she wants to stop things from happening. This novel is a quest for self-exploration, and that is, vividly and perfectly written in the final chapter when she says that, poke me in the eye, pinch me in the west, note my height, ask me to open my mouth wide, shine a torch inside, ask me to open my legs wide, ask me to relax and breathe deeply, shine a torch inside, examine me with your gloved fingers, with your speculum, make notes, laugh about at me at lunch. See if you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody like me. They all do, all the time anyway. come back to me because you have no other means of knowing me. This actually reflects what an introduction by Kamala Das is all about. It's an exploration of a self that is fluid, a self that is multifarious existence. It has got no one truth. In one of the interviews, Jerry Pinto was asked about M and the Whom, whether it was an autobiographical fiction, and he said that for me, M and the Big Whom is all about catharsis. And I personally believe that Meena Kandaswamy's When I Hit You is about her catharsis. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you so much, Professor Orgobashu. It was an enriching experience, I suppose, for all of us. In fact, the PPT, the way you presented your PPT is a perfect example how a PPT should be, precise and to the point. And this is one of the learning curves for our students who are present here and listening to you and all the other speakers. I think this is one of the best PPTs that we have seen. Professor Basu dealt in length with certain terms, postmodern characteristic features. He dealt with autofiction, difference between fiction and faction. I think this was quite comprehensive, the way you explained it to us. I think the session is open for questions if we have any questions from our students and other participants. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much.
Do we have any questions from our students?
I guess not.
No, sir, they are congratulating sir for
I can see that.
their presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Orgobashu, once again for being with us. Be with us till the end, please.
Sure.
Thank you. Now we move on to our next speaker, please.
Okay, then we are moving on to our next presenter, Astha Bishwas, MA English student, RBC College, and her paper is on female used as a commodity in English literature.
Good evening, everyone. I will be presenting my paper. First of all, I'm like to thank the RBC College and RBC Evening College to give us such type of chance. So I'm presenting my paper.
Yes. Just start.
So my topic is Commodification of Female in English Literature. Traveling through ancient ages, mostly we see that that literature supports men and literacy was also limited. So the type of literature also remained biased. So that's why we see that most of the writers portray females as a victim. Elaine Showalter coined the term gynocriticism, which depicts that the language which we use in literature, all this is given by males, and it is also universal. Virginia Woolf, through her famous essay, A Room of One's Own, created a fictional character, Judith Shakespeare, as a sister of William Shakespeare. She depicted that women of that time period didn't have their own freedom, didn't have their own space. That's why they usually can't create their own history. Through commodification, we will primarily focus on the father-daughter relationship. So we will state that how this father-daughter relationship was used as a target of commodification. We know that the father-daughter relationship is a blend of love, affection, and kindness. And by highlighting this point, Freud stated on Oedipus complex that as children, the little boy and girl initially share the same sexual history, the desire for the mother. With the time, they get to know that the phallus is what distinguishes father. Here the boy acquires the castration complex that unless he gives up his love for his phallusless mother, his father might castrate him and strives to represent the phallus himself. The girl is furious with the mother for lacking the phallus, transfers her love to the father object, and strives to have the phallus. As how the girl who sets off to be like her father rather than her mother because the father has a phallus, then begins to acquire femininity in something Freud never really discussed. So this concept totally depicts a daughter's attraction towards her father. Following the depiction of Freud regarding father-daughter relationship, we can convey that the meek and mild nature of a daughter causing her father to use his daughter for his own purpose. But the daughter is acting like she is unaware of this fact. In the literary works of famous writers, this father-daughter relationship taken an opposite turn, where this affection towards the father object made the daughters to sacrifice themselves. The daughters also, to maintain the tag of hospitality, always serve their fathers to travel even in a wrong path. This kind of love affection make the daughters selfless. They lose their own self and walk on the way that their father shows. Judith Butler in 1990 argued that far from being a set of fixed and stable values and role assigned by society, gender was a performance or role enacted by individuals. This performance of gender is, of course, social in the sense it is enacted, validated, and accepted by the society. Texts of Christopher Marlowe and Shakespeare quite have same features. In fact, Shakespeare published his long narrative poem Venus and Adonis 2 weeks after the death of Marlowe, which is quite same with Marlowe's Hero and Leander, which was not published until 1660. And it is also stated that the plot, female characters, structures, and comic scenes are same in both their texts. Marlowe in his The Jew of Malta not only focused on Christian-Jew conflict, but also portrayed the father-daughter relationship. He showed that Barabbas, the rich Jew, to seek his own property, ordered her own daughter to convert herself into Christianity. When Abigail, being a daughter, maintained the tag of faithfulness. When Abigail finds out that her father is using her, she then converts herself into Christianity and serves her entire life to God. Barabbas, being afraid of that fact, Abigail will expose him. She poisons Abigail, including all the nuns in the nunnery. Shakespeare, in his The Tempest, also portrayed the father-daughter relationship in a materialistic way. Prospero, the main protagonist, to gain his kingdom, uses his own daughter, Miranda. Though the tragicomedy ends subtly, but throughout the play, Miranda's character remains in a vein. Similarly, in Greek mythology, Iphigenia, the princess of Mycenae, daughter of King Agamemnon and Queen Clytemnestra, also suffered this victimization. She was sacrificed by Agamemnon to goddess Artemis to winning the Battle of Troy. Iphigenia, a pure of heart girl, being unaware of it, obeyed her father. She didn't question him. Coming in the Victorian age, we witness the roles of women quite improving, and we get to see many women writers were making their marks, such as Jane Austen, George Eliot, Bronte sisters, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and many more. But still, during the Victorian era, there was an unending debate over the roles of women. Austen, through Pride and Prejudice, also shown that a woman is incomplete without marriage. She showed Elizabeth, the main protagonist of the novel, as a separated self, but ultimately the novel ends with a love union of Darcy and Elizabeth. While the era was dominated by writers who treated women as angelic figures, innocent, physically weaker, and nothing less than household commodities.
2 more minutes to sum up your paper.
Okay, I will conclude it. So we find that in every era, the women are always placed in the weakest position. There is no evolution in the roles of women. Many women writers were rising, but no one was evolved in the roles of women. I must conclude. A train of ages came with new evolution, new theory, new culture of writing, but no one came with a light of hope. Some written about the oppression of female characters, some written about how female characters dominated others, but no one given a new portrayal of a female character. They showed dominant Cleopatra, the determined Lady Macbeth, the proud of Elizabeth, but they didn't highlight the sacrificial girls like Abigail, Iphigenia, and Miranda. They portrayed the materialistic father-daughter relationship, but they didn't modify it when the ages passed. They didn't got the idea to emphasize those characters, or they didn't invent any of those types of characters in a bold way. Though we can convey that whether on ancient world, women were presented in materialistic way, on the other hand, ages to ages, women also placed in center, but presented in an ill manner. Literature starts a life of a woman with misery. Nowadays, in present age, the female characters are evolving and revolting. Characters are building like they are fighting against the odds. They are gaining their own victory, but somehow the story starts with oppression. A woman has to gain her own freedom, while a man can live freely in the world and in literature. The time might come when the women have their own free world in every aspect. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Astha, for your wonderful presentation. So as we have pointed out, from the age-old tradition, we are watching that females are being sacrificed in the hands of, even in the hands of their fathers. But in your
Yes, sir.
conclusion, as we have stated that with the example of Miranda, Lady Macbeth, and other examples, so in Shakespeare's plays in the 16th century, when you, as you have stated that for a long time women are being subjugated by
Yes,
men,
sir.
by the society, but in
Yes.
Shakespeare's plays we can see that women are sharing the same platform with the men. If you read
Yes.
Macbeth, the play, you can see that as Macbeth's character is vibrant, Lady Macbeth is also vibrant, is no less,
Yes, sir. I've read
not
that.
lesser than his character. So as we have stated that females are subjugated or represented in a different manner in those writings. There are also examples where the writers have represented women as counterparts, or as we can say that they are as equal, they are no less than the males. So thank you once again for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
So I would
Thank
like
you so
to
much.
invite any questions from the presenters, or as we are all present in this session, if anyone has any question, please unmute your microphone. Is there any question?
Uh,
So
Sir,
there
there
are
is
appreciations. There is one
and
question.
not question actually, it's an observation.
Yes.
Nwapa and Emecheta have given new voice to their female characters and have presented power active characters like Eferu and Idu and even Adaku. I think voice and presentation is changed in postmodern era.
Yes, it's an appreciation probably, and the findings that are related to Astha's presentation. Okay, thank you. So
Thank you.
if you
Thank you for
have
this
any,
advice and thank you for giving
no,
me
no,
this
it's okay.
opportunity.
So if we have any questions, please, if anyone asks to want any question, please unmute your microphone. Otherwise, we'll proceed to our next presenter. So no questions. So
No,
let's
sir.
proceed. Let's proceed
Okay, sir.
forward.
Okay, our next presenter is Otrik Banerjee, BA Honours in English, Rishi Chandra Evening College, Naihati, and his topic is Toni Morrison's literature, criticism on racism and marginalization.
Thank you.
Otrik
Thank you for
Banerjee,
the thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me, everyone?
yes, yes, you're audible.
Okay. So yes, I am Otri Banerjee from RBC Evening College, and I am grateful to have space in this webinar and having great privilege to speak my words. And I have a very um, a rather brief and a short subject focused on a single writer, that is Toni Morrison. And I would like to present my screen. Just a second. So here is the introduction. As we can see, that it opens with a quote by Toni Morrison, that, and I love the quote. It says, if you can only be tall because somebody is on their knees, then you have a serious problem. And my feeling is white people have a very, very serious problem. Quoted by Toni Morrison on January 19, 1998. And this was spoken in a question answer, an interview to the Guardian News, as far as I remember. The contribution of Toni Morrison, being a marginalized Black author from America towards English literature, is like a spark of flame burning down a huge concentration of racist ideology through her works, her subjects, and her audience. I maintained the word her works, her subjects, and her audience in order to portray the Black society, mainly to represent the Black society, because I'm talking about racism, which is the topic I want to cover. She portrayed beautifully and with utmost depth the real scenario before and after the American Civil War, which lasted from 1861 to 1865, the true condition of the marginalized black enslaved people who were captivated and tortured irrespective of their age, their gender, or other circumstances. Her words, which were strong, bold representation of free-flowing narrative, brings out the sense of terror, violence, and dominance of the race throughout her works. Her characters are so realistic and worldly for the black community that anybody can undergo an experience of the horse screams that once was oppressed by the whites. In this presentation, we are going to reflect some of her works as an excellence of literary contribution that is based on race. By critically analyzing her masterpieces, we will unfold the darkest periods of blacks and the scenario of the marginalized as race. Her continuous efforts in order to represent her race throughout the dominance of whites brought her the most prestigious Nobel Prize in literature. Nobel Prize in Literature 1993 was awarded to Toni Morrison, who in novel characterized by visionary force and poetic import gives life to an essential aspect of American reality. My previous presentators has already told about Toni Morrison, and I have very few things to tell about her. Rather, I would go brief introduction to Toni Morrison. She was the brightest stars of American literature, whose literary contribution towards the black society is a magnificent effort, being a female Afro-American woman. She was born as Chloe Anthony Beaufort Morrison in February 1931 in Lorain, Ohio. She was the second of 4 children from a family which belonged to the working class and had the notion of marginalized as black. As we know, while we are in the seminar, in the webinar, we are all sympathizing the black society as the race, the gender, the feminist notions, but we can only sympathize. We cannot empathize completely to them because we have not gone through the similar situations that they have faced or they have been facing through. But here, when Morrison was at the age of 2, she had to face severe challenges when a family landlord set fire to the house they used to live, and they were inside the home. The landlord did so because they were unable to pay the rent, and they were unable to pay the rent. So this was just an action to take revenge, and that too by a black towards a black. The basic upbringing of Morrison, the future novelist, began with the installation in her a sense of heritage and language, telling her the traditional Afro-American folk tales, stories, and songs by her parents. As a child, Morrison read the authors which were her favorite, like Jane Austen and Leo Tolstoy. So we can find she is reading Jane Austen and Leo Tolstoy, who are the white authors. After being Catholic at the age of 12, she took her baptismal name, an Anthony, named after Anthony of Padua, and was nicknamed Toni, which turned out to be the famous name in the literary world, winning prestigious prizes. Here I come to the criticism on Morrison's literature and of marginalized. Throughout her works, Morrison exercised the dilemma, conflicts between the society and the characters of it. The people, the blacks, the slaves, marginalized were her figures of interest in her novels. Most of her settings were based on Ohio, the birthplace of author. Her famous literary works include Beloved, Sula, Song of Solomon, and also the most controversial novel, The Bluest Eye, which my previous presentators have already mentioned. The controversy aroused due to her strong representation of bold languages, scenes of violence and terror through her words. The ideology of writing and treating the protagonist characters was subjected mainly through the blacks and focused on the difficulties and obstacles, even the harassment which a black had to face throughout the lifetime. Being a female and a black writer, it was a tough job for Morrison to write such a bold but a bitter truth of the society of the marginalized. However, she was brave enough to express her emotions on racism.
Sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah,
Atrit, but you need to sum up.
I'm just yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just summing up the thing. Okay, I'm not sure. I'm quoting some lines from her interview. I'm not gonna give up one drop of melanin to get there. I'm not gonna erase my race, my gender to get there. I want all of it. I deserve all of it, and we all do. I don't want to be blended, bleached out in order to participate in this country and walk in the hall of power or quarter that I want to. These are the words that she spoke in an interview on the racism to the Guardian News. The Bluest Eye and Beloved representing the racism, slavery, and marginalization on blacks. Being a representative of the marginalized blacks, Toni Morrison portrayed the pain of harsh truth, desire, and bleached, ungained beauty. We can see throughout the two novels, The Bluest Eye and The Beloved, she has represented how beautiful the lives of blacks could be if they wanted to. As I have to sum up, I cannot go through the deeper context. I just want to go through the lines quoted by Morrison. The people, she quoted this line on racism. The people who do this thing, who practice racism, are bereft. There is something distorted about the psyche. There is huge waste and corruption and distortion. It is like a huge, profound erosion that nobody examines. But what it is, it feels crazy. It is crazy. Throughout her most controversial and most criticized work, The Bluest Eye, she wanted to display the desire that urges in a black heart in order to find herself respected or adored in the society. Pecola, the protagonist of the novel, is the face of the race, and she represents the stereotype condition of the blacks in the society. And the story evolves around her society and neighborhood, which treats her as a material, a bitch, rather inhuman, just due to the darkness of her skin color. A drunken father, a not so caring mother, a runaway brother, and a neglected society made her life just so critical that she wished to be adored, or inhibit something in herself that could raise her to some extent to the elite whites. This Pradarship prayed for the blue eyes, which itself is a symbol of beauty, elite and somehow white, or fairness, which she wanted to achieve. And this is the Beloved story in which Morrison deals with the problem of slavery and its impact on the black people and the struggle for emancipation. It focuses on the relationship between the community and the individual. The novel shows how a mother can murder her own daughter, continues to live in the same haunted house where the crime was committed. The black people who dwell in the haunted house can't easily forget their memories of the past, slavery associated with the sweet home, quote unquote. Toni Morrison explores in the novel how far a black individual can establish to find the meaning of his or her identity. Coming to the conclusion, Morrison's effort bring out the voice of the black individual irrespective of the challenges that had to face in a so-called patriarchal society is a remarkable achievement. Her literary contribution towards the race and even to the literary world of American literature is a great diction to the asset of marginalized. And I would end up with a quote by Ralph Ellison. "When I discover who I am, I'll be free." It is quoted in The Invisible Man. And I would like to end my presentation from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Atrik, for your insightful presentation and a detailed discussion on Toni Morrison's writing. And as we have stated, that the marginalization has multiple layers. Yes. Marginalization in name of caste, in name of class, in name of race, in name of gender, in name of religion, even marginalization, even in the name of the color complexion of the human skin. Yes. So marginalization has multiple layers. So a beautiful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any question?
Sir, in the chat box, there is, I think, a question that does the term Black Society exists? Who coined it? Emecheta lived in America. When she traveled and stayed there as Afro-American, her society was called Dark People.
So yeah, this is a context that I would like to focus on. The question does not talk about the black society. Actually, the black society by itself, as Toni Morrison, she herself says that a race is nothing but explained by her own terms, her own conditions. Like, you cannot just dignify someone with a race, and not no literature can explicitly treat itself subjugated from race. There is no literature that does not comprise to be without any race. So the term black society, I can definitely say it does exist in the because recently we can see the case of George Floyd, and there is mass protests from the global across the globe, and there is no one who coined the term black society, but I would rather say that you have focused on Imicheta, who lived in America, and she traveled and stayed as an Afro-American. So was Toni Morrison and her family. But they traveled, if you focus on the background and the history, you will find that there will be a contradiction, that they will be belonging to the slave background, or the background which were enslaved by the whites and dominated by the whites. So I think you
Hello,
will, yes.
hello, sir. Hello.
Hello.
Sir, there is no such term that black society, but whether they are black, so they can be called as black people. Black people is the term, but black society is not the term coined by somebody, whether it is critic or a writer. So we cannot call them black society.
Yeah,
Racial
obviously
segregation is
we.
there.
Okay.
As such, racial segregation is there, sir, but nobody can call them as black society. We can call them black people.
I am not just distinguishing themselves with the white one, but in contradiction, when we have to compare them, as I am not comparing this, these are all termed by the narrator, the author herself, Toni Morrison, as she criticizes her through her works. So this
But
is
sir, when
just.
you use the term, there should be authenticity with someone critic or some thinker or philosopher or any writer that
No,
who has
obviously,
coined the
no,
term.
no, 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 no.
Otherwise, we
The
cannot use
kind
the term.
that I would like to pass this opinion to Anindya Chakraborty sir, if he has any opinion on this
Sir,
topic.
sir, I have a question. As you have asked that blacks, there is no black society but black people. So, what do you want to say by the term black? Black. You are all. I mean, when we are talking about those people whom we consider as our, ideas, as our concepts, so we are using the term black people, or in case of black society, so people together society. But the very term black. So what is there in the term black? Is it a term from that society, from the very society you have stated black society, or is it a term from the white ones society? So who are using this black word? I want to ask this question. Who are using this term black, the very term black? Black people are there, black society are there, the society of the people are there, and probably their color complexion is black. Okay, I want to ask that the very term black, what does it signify? Is it
Actually,
a discrimination? Color complexion, you are
actually, the
saying.
color complexion is differs.
Color,
Otherwise, no
color
matter there.
complexion. Yes,
So
Color
but
it is
sir,
complexion is
a,
there only.
sir, I would like to interrupt. This is not the philosophical way that I am representing. This is not just a materialistic way. I am rather focusing on a philosophical way of representing the black society, which is the harsh reality which we have to consider in case of reading the literature. So when we are going through the literature of Toni Morrison, while she is, we are just sympathizing through her writings. We are having a catharsis through her writing when we are going through the characters of Ticola or the characters of Sethe, where so we cannot just say that they does not belong to the black society. Yes, they do belong to the black society, and this society is being marginalized by the whites and other color sections. So sir, I
Okay,
hope
sir.
you
Color
have got your
complexion is there. Maybe they are black, but we cannot say them black society. We can say them black people only. No
sir,
matter
I
you
think we
discuss
should not.
about it
I
or
should not.
marginalization.
Sir, I think that we should not call them also black people. It
That's
is
the thing.
also a mark of division. The binary white and black. So if we
Okay, sir.
again call them black,
Yeah,
so
Americans,
again we are
American that
marginalizing them.
time colonized the people, American people that
Yes,
time
yes,
differentiated
yes,
that black people and white
yes,
people.
yes. It was
So we
it
can
was
call
used to
them
be
black people.
differentiated. Yes, sir. It was used to
But
be
we cannot
differentiated.
say them black society. Even when
Exactly.
Amecheta was living in America, she was not called as black society. Or even Nigerian many writers like old Franka lived there as a
Yes.
elite and studied there, but not ever said
Sir,
that
sir, if you go through
he's
the
from
works,
black
sir, if
society.
you go through the
Sir,
works of Ref,
I'm
Ref
interrupting
physics.
both of you. I'm interrupting both
Okay,
of you.
okay,
So
sir. It
let
would be a new
let
term that you have coined.
no
Okay, let it be, sir.
no
Okay,
sir.
thank
It's
you.
okay, sir. Let us progress to our other
Yes, yes.
presentations.
Please,
Then, if
please
we can
progress.
conclude our
Yes,
session
yes.
before
Of course,
time,
sir.
we will open a session for discussion. Okay.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you both of you. Thank
Thank you,
you
sir.
both of you. So may I request the student coordinator to proceed, please. We have other presenters.
Okay, sir. Then we are proceeding.
We move on to our next presenter. Kindly, I think the question that Devil Gaming, sir, may I know your name, by the way? Devil Gaming, you go by the name of Devil Gaming. Can I know your name, sir?
Please
Okay, I think
unmute your mic and say the name, please. Devil Gaming.
I think so. Can we have your name, sir? Because it goes by the name of Devil Gaming. So if you can tell us your name, and the question that you have asked is very pertinent kind of a question, and we would like to have an open discussion on this after the presentations of our students. So be with us till the end. So I would request the students coordinator to kindly move on to the next participant, please.
Okay, sir. Then we are moving on to our next participant. Our next participant is Aisha Haq, MA English, student of Rishi Bankim Chandra College, and her topic is redefining marginalization in Marjane Satrape's Persepolis.
Thank you, Didi, for the introduction. Just give me a
Aisha, please
second
start.
to. Yes, yes,
Okay,
please.
okay.
Yes. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Today I will be presenting my paper on marginalization in Marja Satrapi's Persepolis. The Iranian Revolution of 1979, also known as the Islamic Revolution, was the result of public disagreement with the dictatorship of Shah. It's true that this revolution helped Iran to develop. It provided the locals with all the opportunities to get educated. But what's the profit of this education if they don't get the basic rights as per their education? This revolution resulted in mass immigration, nearly 2.5 million of Iranians to the Western countries. Talking about contemporary Iran, many people of Iran wanted revolution, but not the religious one, which took away their basic rights in the name of religion. Before the revolution, wearing veils was a matter of choice for women, but immediately after Khomeini came to power, veils became mandatory. There were banning of music, alcohol, fashion, women's sports, and dancing. Women were not even allowed to play cards or watch football matches. Even one side of the road was reserved for men and the other side for the quote-unquote others. Veil was the curtaining off of a woman's dreams, desires, feelings, and fantasies. They were discriminated everywhere, be it home or outside. The married women had no other option than to be dependent on their husbands, who were less educated than their wives. After a few years of this massive change, the emigrated girls started writing about their struggle for assimilation and identity crisis. Some of the books are Persepolis by Marja Satrapi, Mystic Jihad by Azadeh Moavani, Foreigner by Nahid Rachlin, Reading Lolita in Tehran by Azhar Nafisi, Even after all this time, A Story of Love, Revolution and Living Iran by Afshine Latifi. These books prove that the so-called marginalized silenced subalterns learned how to speak. The focus of the paper is on the politics of marginalization that is working behind the subjugation of women in Satrapi's Persepolis. When she started writing this graphic novel, she was not a professional novelist or even a comic book writer. While living in Paris, she was wounded to see how the Western people think about her nation. Though she is proud of being an Iranian, she embraces Western culture also. While the revolution was going on in Iran, Satrapi tells her parents that she wants to be a part of it. But her father says that protesting can be too dangerous. They shoot people. And also says that being a part of the revolution can make her society's most powerful opposition to Islamist politics. It breaks her heart and she says, God, why are you? At the age of 14, she shifts to Austria more confident than scared. She remembers herself wearing a hijab with a jacket and Naihati shoes. She feels a deep connection with Iran because most of her childhood memories revolve around that nation, but also finds herself involved with the West. During her early teenage days, she becomes a victim of culture clash between the East and West. Her favorite book is Dialectic Materialism, which is a comic book that distinguishes the idea between political theorist Karl Marx and the philosopher René Descartes. From being a devout Muslim, she reached such a phase that she realized God does not fit in Marxist philosophy. There is no place for God in dialectic materialism. In her mid-teens, she cuts off her hair like a boy, starts to wear Western dresses, and starts smoking with her friends. After a few ups and downs, she tells her parents that she wants to go back to Tehran. After coming back to Tehran, she expects her friends to understand her Western progressive laws, but she realizes that none of them agrees with her just to avoid government persecution. After coming back to Tehran, she starts feeling relieved to see the friendly faces and to be a part of that culture again. But the next moment, she feels suffocated with many Iranian teenagers, including her own friends. Even in her own country, she struggles to cope up with its own culture and feels like a foreigner. She feels that her freedom has been snatched away. She says, I feel like I'm constantly wearing a mask. She feels religion is impressive, but the faith in God is not. Religion and God can exist without one another. She questions, is religion defending our physical integrity or it's just opposed to fashion? Persepolis is a story of rebellion and independence. She mentions, though the Islamic Republic's strict laws brings massive change in dress code and people's behavior, but behind the closed doors, these were the same people who throws parties with alcohol and questions the rules. She realizes the contrast between the official representation of her country and the real life of the people. As Satrapi talks about dress code, to make sure that women won't tempt men, there were rules for women to cover up their whole body and keep themselves away from men and public places. An ideal revolutionary woman, quote unquote ideal revolutionary woman, should be traditional and follower of all the rules, should know her limits as a housewife and a mother. After the revolution, the main purpose of the state missionary was to keep the religious consciousness inside the people so that they can be further tortured, silenced, and exploited in the name of quote unquote holy Islam. Religious propaganda has been used in such a way that most of the people started living in an illusion. Hypocrisy reached at its high point when Khomeini banned Western television programs, but also used the same technology to promote Islam. I must conclude by saying that though Persepolis is an autobiography, but it tells the story of all women living under the shadow of tyranny. Writings like this deals with how women often face issues of visibility, sexuality, and identity crisis, and they choose to be a survivor rather than a victim. In an interview, Satrapi says, the goal of my life is always to be marginal, to be on the margins, and not to be part of any group. It is because Satrapi and millions of women realize that the margin is not an exactly negative place, but the opposite, a field of freedom, while living at their own wills and fulfilling their dreams are possible without any judgment, assimilation, and obstacles. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, then now I would invite questions. If anyone have any question.
Aisha, thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Okay, no, there is no question in the chat box. Then, sir, can we move on to the next participant?
Yes, move on to the next participant, please.
Okay, then Medhatithi.
Okay, the next participant according to the list is Baraknath Banu S. Sir, are you present here? Sir, I don't think that he is present here.
Then we move on to the next.
Okay, sir. Mahua? Please, the next.
The next is Medhatithis, I suppose. Medhatithis, you are the one, I suppose.
Yes, sir. I will be the last presenter.
Oops, sorry, sir. I forgot to unmute my mic. Okay, our next presenter is Medhatithis Chakraborty, student of RBC College, Naihati, and her topic is Hijra, what it meant to be a transgender in Indian subcontinent. Medhatithi, please proceed.
Thank you, Moa, for introducing me, and good evening, everyone, and my fellow participants. And let me present my screen. Okay, my topic, as she introduced, is Hijra, what it meant to be a transgender in the Indian subcontinent. And my basic texts are Nagor Kirtan and is a 2017 Bengali film written and directed by Kaushik Ganguly. It is the story of Porimal, a trans woman. It highlights her struggles and her traumas that she faced in a due course. And another of my text is Funny Boy, which is a coming-of-age novel by Canadian author Shyam Shelvadurai. It tells the tale of RG or Arjun Selvaratnam, set in Sri Lanka, where Selvadurai grew up. Funny Boy is constructed in the form of 6 poignant stories about a boy coming to age within a wealthy Tamil family in Colombo. Between the ages of 7 and 14, he explores his sexual identity and encounters the Sinhala Tamil tensions leading up to the riots, in 1983 riots. Now, the term transgender, that people have a gender identity or a gender expression that differs from their sex assigned at birth. Some transgender people who desire medical assistance to transition from one sex to another identify as transsexual. Transgender, often shortened as trans, is also an umbrella term. And the third gender or the third sex is a concept which individuals are categorized either by themselves or by society as neither man nor woman. It is also a social category present in societies that recognize 3 or more genders. Now, in Indian subcontinent, we have our mythological historical text that mentions the third gender, and yet our societies treat them worse than animals. They are marginalized and to some extent a food of laughter among the so-called normal people. Reference to a third sex can be found throughout the texts of India's 3 ancient spiritual traditions, Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism, and it can be inferred that Vedic culture recognized 3 genders. The Vedas describe individuals as belonging to one of the 3 categories according to one's nature or prakriti. The 2 great Sanskrit epic poems, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, indicate the existence of a third gender in ancient Indic society. Some versions of Ramayana tells that in one part of the story, the hero Rama lives into exile in the forest. Halfway there, he discovers that most of the people of his hometown Ayodhya were following him. He asked the men and women to return back, and with that, those who were neither men nor women did not know what to do, or they stayed there. When Rama returned from exile years later, he discovered them still there and blessed them, saying that there will be a day when they too will have a share in ruling the world. Another great epic, Mahabharata, there is also mention of the third sex. Arjuna, one of the greatest warriors on the earth, had to accept the curse of Urvashi and accept the life of an eunuch, Brihannala. Another example in the Mahabharata is of Iravana. Before Kurukshetra war, Iravan, who is the son of Ulupi the Naga princess and Arjuna, offers his blood to goddess Kali to ensure the victory of the Pandavas, and Kali agrees to grant him the power. On the night before the battle, Ravan expresses a desire to get married before he dies. No woman was willing to marry a man doomed to die in a few hours. So Lord Krishna, as Mohini, marries him. In South India, Hijras claim Iravan as their progenitor and call themselves Aravanis. In Buddhist Vinayana, codified its present form around the 2nd century BC and said to be handed down by oral tradition from Buddha himself. There are four main sex gender categories: male, female, Ubhayato people of dual sexual nature, and Pandaka, people of non-normative sexual natures, perhaps originally denoting a deficiency in male sexual capacity. In spite of having such a background, it is a pity to see the condition of the third gender and the trans people in Indian subcontinent. Belonging to the third gender or a trans is considered to be a taboo. The third gender people are called by derogatory terms like chakka, and both they and the trans are food of laughter for most of the so-called, quote, straight people. Now, the psychoanalysts have tried to have a psychoanalytical analysis of their transgender experiences. Freudian theory laid the foundation for a felicitous engagement of the psychoanalysis with transgender experience. Building on the work of sexologist Freud, not only possessed a universal bisexuality, thereby implying that all human beings are transgender in our unconscious, but also indexed something in sexuality that exists or grasps. In Freudian psychoanalysis, gender is determined by the mental reaction and the development that results from the subject's discovery of the numerical real. For Freud, at the moment when a girl or boy individual discovers the condition of their biological sex, they respond mentally. But in our societies, especially the subcontinental societies, even before the child is able to discover his or her own sexuality, the so-called societal norms are enforced upon him or her. To quote Professor Niladriya Chatterjee, gender is therefore more social than biological. Both Freud and Lacan were vocal to the problems of trans people. Freud urged his colleagues to listen carefully to the fantasies of the trans people, yet psychoanalysts and institutional psychoanalysts have been tone deaf to the transgender desire. Lacanians have deemed transgender experience an indicator of psychosis. Such pathologization has failed transgender subjects, asserts Patricia Gargovici in her brilliant and provocative transgender psychoanalysis, a Lacanian perspective on sexual difference. But yet, the problems of the trans people goes unheard, and there is a much increase of transgender people committing suicides. So to conclude, I will say that trans people and the third gender are a truly invisible gender in the Indian subcontinent. In spite of having the mythological backgrounds, as mentioned before, they are treated worse than animals. They are considered inauspicious at certain times and times auspicious as the situation demands. More or less, they are never considered human beings and are a source of entertainment for people. Even the psychologists who speak of their mental health remains unheard. The psychological trauma faced by them is unfathomable. They are the true Dalits. They don't even exist on the caste, class, and gender hierarchy. So it can be inferred from the above discourse that the condition of this section of society is truly pitiable. Though there has been movements regarding their rights, more and more researchers' activities are needed in the coming days to improve their conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Medhatithis, for this wonderful paper. on transgenders in Indian subcontinent and how they too can be called Dalits in the true sense of the term. It was a wonderful paper. Now I'd request participants if they have any questions for Medhatithis.
No, sir. I think they don't have any question.
I don't think they have any question. I think Devil Gaming has made a comment in the box that it is very nice. In Marathi literature, Rajan Gavas has explored the lives of such people in Bandar Bhog. So Devil Gaming, sir, may we know your name, please? Because the kind of insights that you are giving us are really helpful for us. In fact, we too are learning from your comments. So kindly give us your name, please. My question to Medhatithis will be, in fact, now it's an open session for all of us. My question for all of you, in fact, is how do we deal with this situation of...
Hello, sir. I want to interrupt. I'm sorry, sir.
Okay.
Sir, should we call the names of the presenters who could not present? Probably some of them would be present.
Are they present? I think the student coordinators know very well whether they are present or not. So
yes.
Yeah.
So can Medhatithis call the names once again?
Yes. Yes, sir. 3 of them could not present their paper or were absent at that time. Amit Kumar Mondol, Anindya Ghosh, and Anindita Shom. So anybody of those them are present now?
Amit Kumar Mondol is there. I can see him.
Yes, sir. I also see him. So.
No, Amit Kumar Mondal has presented, I suppose.
No, sir, he has not presented.
Okay.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Hello.
Sir, myself, Mr. Warke from Kolhapur.
Okay, sir. It's nice to meet you, sir.
I am as a research student working on Nigerian culture, and that's why I am also interested in Nigerian African Black people society, and that's why I had notion about the Black society. And now Rajan Ghosh is from our Marathi literature, and he is a national writer. So he has been explained about very well about such people, that what we call it, transgender people, very well in Bandarbo.
Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your insights into this.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So Amit Mondal, sir, if you are present, if you want to give your paper. Medhatithis, just ask him if he is willing to present his paper.
Yeah, but sir, Amit Kumar Mondal, sir, are you here? Please unmute yourself and speak.
I think technologically he is not here, but physically he is there.
Yes, it might be a network issue.
It might be a glitch on his part. There might be some technological glitch on his part. So I suppose, Anindo, let us open this forum, and if we have any questions to any of our participants, I think we can ask, anyone can ask questions to our participants if they want to. It's an open forum if you have any questions. Now, my question, I have one question. Since we have been theorizing on margins, the marginal literature or literature of marginality, my question to all of you, in fact, when we talk of marginality, we have theorized it, we presented papers. How do you think that the conditions can improve on a practical ground? Because theorizing, it's a kind of a thing that we have been theorizing. How do you think that the condition of transgenders, condition of women, condition of lower caste people can be improved? Is education the only way in which that can be improved? Because I don't think education can improve a lot, because we still have advertisements of matrimonial columns where we want a Brahmin and a Caste girl. So do you think?
Sir, I was when a few days back only, there was the matrimonials are there, and now in a few days back there are Caste matrimony and Brahmin matrimony. means they have the divisions are there. So I was telling my classmates that this thing that how is this in standing in the 21st century that and even after that, and we are talking so much of marginalization, caste, gender, and in the national televisions like this, people come up with this kind of advertisements.
This is the thing, Mane. What is the answer to it, Mane? Do we have any answer to how do we improve conditions?
So only the change of mentality can, I
If
think.
Professor Orgobashu can also come into this argument.
It's not an argument.
Professor Anando Mojumdar has already given us a comment. You can unmute yourself and please speak up.
This is an observation and opinion on my end. I have always believed that it's the narrative that eventually contributes to the understanding of the nation. It's the stories that formulate the nation. You know, even in the final episode of Game of Thrones, that's exactly what Peter Dinklage talks about. He says that he will be the king who knows the best of the stories, right? So it's the stories. We need to bring this into the part of the bedtime stories. You know, for example, I'm giving you a simple example from the indigenous narrative, that of Birsa Munda. Nobody talks about Birsa Munda, okay? And Birsa Munda became the Dharti Ava in Morsheta Devi's Upon in a novel. We know that, right?
Exactly.
He embraced the ground and he started crying that, you know, you are my part, you are my daughter. That narrative needs to be a part of our everyday narrative. You know, parents need to tell their children stories along that line, because it's the stories that rejuvenate the entire thing. Legally, you can put in a lot of barriers, but until and unless, you know, it's fundamentally ingrained within, you cannot demount the narrative that is there. So that's what I believe.
Exactly. I would also like Anando Mojumdar sir to kindly unmute yourself and if you have any opinion on this.
Thank you so much. I already said that it's a kind of an applied research. What we do here at the University of Alberta, we have a humanities department, and under the humanities department, we do a lot of CSL, like community service learning, internships. So that is something, courses that we take in the class, and then we go to the community. So whatever we have learned in the classroom, we use it to the community, and this is a kind of our internships program, which is paid by the government. So this is kind of the awareness that we go to the society and community. Suppose in Canada, there are a lot of immigrant people and a lot of immigrant communities coming, but you know, there are a lot of problems. So we go and we take the classroom materials and we go to the community and we teach them as their friend instead of their teachers and all these things. So this is the kind of awareness. And then what they have told us, we again come to the classroom and then we discuss with our professor and with our all colleagues and all these things. So this is a combination, like this is a kind of a margin between us as a researcher to go to the community and then bring back their feedback from the community and then go to the university and then we talk each other and then we find out the solution how we can do academically and we can also do practically in the community. So this is a community and college or university amalgamation.
Exactly. I too think the same. Now, I would also like to deliberate upon another thing, and I would also like a comment from our sir from Kolhapur, if he is there. I think he is there online. My question, I think this was one of the questions that crept up yesterday also. One of those participants came up with a question: should SC/ST categories in India be looked into now? After so long, reservations have been provided to these people. Should the government look into these provisions that have been provided, or are we okay with it? This was one of the questions that crept up yesterday. So I would like to, I would request our teacher from Kolhapur, if he has his opinion, if we can have his opinion on this. Now, if we have some other person commenting on this, what are your opinions on this? Because yesterday, the kind of answer that we got was a very diplomatic answer.
Sir,
Sir.
I would like to comment one thing. I would like to
Anindo.
Okay.
Anindo, let him speak. Anindo.
Me.
Anindo.
So let Medhatithis speak. Okay,
Acha,
sir. Now I'm speaking.
Medhatithis first.
Sir, as Ananda sir has pointed out that only the So I'm unmuting myself. Okay, let Medhatithis speak first, then I'll speak.
Okay, thank you, sir. So one point of this SC/ST reservations is that we are living in West Bengal. So if we judge by our state's perspective, it won't do justice to the others, because a few days back, if I've seen in the news that Odisha, a girl, she picked up flowers from a from someone's house who belonged to the so-called upper class, and the whole of their community has been ostracized by them, by that upper class. And even a few days back in Bihar, the dead body of a woman, a middle-aged woman who died, when her family went for the funeral, her body was pulled down from the pyre and was not and sent to some other place meant for the burning of dead bodies of a lower caste. So still, in spite of such reservations of SC/ST, we are in facing that we are seeing this kind of incidents in our country. These are some recent ones. So I think the government should look into that thing, that whether the people who really need it are getting that, because it's kind of something that those who are getting, they are getting through their generations. There's no one to check that whether they really need audit, and those who don't get, they don't even have a certificate that is needed to have their rights. I suppose, if I'm not wrong, that their rights, this quota, this reservations are their right, but they don't have that certificate. They go to a panchayat, those people who don't have regular meals, they ask the panchayats ask money from them to provide a certificate. So I think the government should look into this matter, that whether they are getting that same that such facilities, and those who really require.
In fact, what I believe is, I think, this is my opinion solely and privately, that we have a certain bias for people coming from SC/ST. In fact, students coming from SC/ST, we as a human being have a bias towards that because they tend to get reservation. But my point is, they are getting reservation. That is not their fault. The reservation is being given by the system. The reservation is being given by the government which we choose. So I think the government has to have a vision in front of them, what Megatithi is trying to say. And given a chance, if I get that particular reservation, I would not leave that reservation. Because we should not romanticize poverty and we should not romanticize reservation. Given an opportunity, we too are very selfish enough to do what others are doing. So I think somewhere down the line, the system is at fault, and we, the citizens of the country, should change that system first. We should be voting for the right form of government. I don't know what is the right form of government.
And so the thing you said, that we have means the people who belong to having certain surnames in our country, that even before looking at their talents, we build a that okay, he's having that surname, then, or she's having this surname, then he's from the reservation quota and he's getting the quota. So when we form means this kind of thing we form about them, this kind of opinion, even before knowing the person. So this is one more thing, that this surname that means okay, having this surname, and if he's not having this surname, then he is something else. So this is one more problem we have in our country.
This is also a problem. But in a developed country like America, we too have that black community thing. They are quite educated. They are culturally quite strong. They tend to seem quite strong. But they too behave in the same way.
Institutional education, having degrees, doesn't mean that a person is having an open mind or something, that he is really educated.
Exactly.
institutional degrees are something else, and being educated in the true sense of term is something else.
Exactly. Okay, so if anyone has any other question.
Sir, may I speak? Sir, may I say
Definitely,
something?
definitely.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, as Ananda sir has pointed out that they do what they do in their university. So, my consideration, education is not going to work alone, because we demand that we are educated and literate, but we know that there are also a large number of people who are away from the area of education or away from the touch of education. So only education is not going to serve all the things. So besides that, the social level evolution is also demanded. So in the seminar, the previous seminar that was on African literature, origin and culture, we have seen that so many participants from Africa were suffering from the lack of the proper connectivity in their mobile or in their computer. So they waited for a long time, even for one day, and the second day, one presenter was presenting at the last, when it was after 8 or 8.5 hours. So his quest for presenting, his quest for to say what he feels, what he has represented, that is very what I can say. That is an example of inspiration, if I say it in common term. And also that human beings are also fighting and also doing their own work, because many government organizations and non-government organizations have extended their hands. In the pandemic situation, we have seen that so many non-government organizations are there who were, for 60 days or for 65 or 70 days, they were thoroughly giving food, baby food, medicine, clothes, whatever they could to the people who are in distress, who are worse condition than us. And we have seen after Amphan the situation of the Sundarban. So many organizers, so many teams went there, talked with them, they tried to help them, because over the pandemic it was a double effect of Amphan. Then the downpours have started. So Sundarban people, I have attended 2 seminars when I was acquainted with one man. He was popularly known as Mangrove Man. His name was Umashankar Mondol. He's probably a teacher of geography in Murshidabad, and he was saying that a very different kind of point, that he was saying that they have seen that when the blocks were made in the middle position of the land and the sea, the JCBs were working, and he suggested that the load of the JCB was too much for the soil or for the sand. So after the JCB worked there was also a hole or a lack of proper construction for the area, for the barrier between the land and the sea. So after the movement of the JCB, the land again became infected by the sea, and we all know that the salty water, wherever it goes, it devastates the land, the home, everywhere. The trees devastates, apart from those sundari or those trees. So not only the education is not only going to serve, and what we are thinking that and the point of reservation. Yes. So we usually think of reservation when we usually think of job, basically job, for our job. And when we are in school, we didn't know about reservation. I personally comment that I didn't know about reservation. Yes, so some students were there whose economic condition was not well. So the school authority used to provide them books, clothes. So we also appreciated that. Yes, they are our friends. So some of our friends were there who could not even have their lunch before coming to the school. So when we came to know that, we used to take the money from so many students and we used to share our foods with them. But when we entered in the college, we saw that there are reservations, there are what we used to call them, the quota, basically the term quota. Okay, but we should also mention that as we are mentioning the selected categories, OBCA, OBCB, SC and ST, there are the most number of seats are there for the general category. It is the main thing. The most number
of seats are there in any organization, in any institution, in any area, those seats are for the general category. And the reservations, the number of the reservation, the seats of the reservations and the number of the general seats are much lesser than the general one. So we usually, yes, as you have said, that we are not romanticizing our our caste or anything. If I have got any opportunity, I would have taken that. That is the very truth that I believe. That if, because when it reminds me about the theory of Darwin, struggle for existence. DSR used to teach that in the class. DSR used to talk about that. So he used to give the example that when we are boarding into the train, we used to board as early as we can. Using our elbow, using our leg, by pulling and pushing others, we used to get into the train. So there we don't think about the person who could not get the train. But here we are talking because we feel as we are here, but there are also so many people who do not have this opportunity to share their views in these kinds of platforms. Because we know that that people who are away from the light of education, how are they going to read these books? How are they going to participate in these kinds of webinars or seminars? Because we are not able to access with the online education, because large number of students are there in the rural areas who do not have the potentiality to buy a computer or even a cell phone, a smartphone. Even the electricity is not proper in their areas. So how are they going to participate in these kinds of webinars or these kinds of teachings or teaching learning processes? So the total theme is very broad. We are talking those things because we are reading, we feel that we have to do something. We can do something by talking with others, by knowing those things, by writing, by reading these things. But this thing is not going to help only. We have to think in a broader concept, because unless that in the Dalit literature, in the last day's session, we know very well that the individualized life stories are best depicted by the individual who have felt the distress, who have felt the sorrows. We can see the example that among our friends and in our neighborhood, a boy whose skin color complexion is black, usually he is called Kalu by the name Kalu. So some of us in the civilized society also, just he or she doesn't know the name of the boy or the man, calls him Kalu, come here. So only that boy who is called with the name Kalu, he can only understand the feeling of being called a name with that kind of name. So we are trying our best. By we are talking, by sharing our view, we will also be able to know from others. But this is, it was prevalent in the previous arena. It is here. Probably it will be here if we do nothing to eradicate the caste, class, the division, any kind of division in name of caste, class, gender, or sex, anything. So just it is our endeavor. We are learning from others. We are learning from students, from teachers, and that we are hoping that we can one day eradicate these all binaries from our society. That is it. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anindya. Thank you, Anindya, for being very hopeful and optimistic. We too are optimistic about it. Let's see what happens. So,
otherwise, we cannot move forward, sir.
Devil Gaming, sir, if we can have you, can you please unmute yourself?
Hello, sir.
Sir. What
Yes,
is?
welcome,
We would
sir.
like to know your opinion about the reservation system.
That as we see, sir, except in India, in other countries like America, Nigeria, Africa, China, there is a reservation, no reservation policy is there. Only they are thinking whether it is class or gender. They are based on rich or poor. Not other categories are there. So the reservation policy must be now changed in India also. It must be on a economic base. Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. But according to you, it should be on economic basis, not on caste basis.
Otherwise, there would be caste and casteism always rendered throughout the life of the people, and they would suffer because as the sir said now, he is a Kalu. Kalu means a black person. Like that, he is either Bahar, Mang, Sambar, or other caste people that always would be rejected, and what we can say, they would be blamed. You belong to this caste or this gender, like that. And so, like transgender also, we should change our mentality on the basis of reservation policy, on the basis of economics, not on the color or gender or class or caste even.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Do we have any other questions, or shall we end our session?
So just one question I have. Like, do you think that the removal of reservation system would again initiate the injustice towards the, the minority communities, people, like, as you already know, how the upper class people treat the Dalits or the SST, as also Medhatithis just suggested, just by just looking at the surnames?
Anisha, this is a very pertinent question. There can be, as of now, standing in the 21st century India, I don't think that we still have a society where equality, fraternity and brotherhood can prevail. Actually, we still are not into the 21st century, though definitely calendar wise we are into it. But I think India of today, there are certain regions there you have to pocket mark. The UP, Bihar, Maharashtra to a certain extent, in fact, Punjab to Haryana. I think the Madhya Pradesh, the inequalities still prevail. The attitude of people towards the towards people coming from a Dalit background has not changed. So, as Devil Gaming Sir has just now told us that it's on economic basis that we should be doing that, I think that would be one of the things that we could do. But the attitudes have to change. It's the society has to come up with something so that we can change our mentality. Otherwise, I don't think we can do anything with our society.
Sir, please call me Varke sir. Don't say Devil Gaming. It's a name that I couldn't change it.
No, sir. Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Varke sir. Otherwise, all the participants and the thinkers would think that he's a devil. Thank you, sir.
So Anisha, I think I don't think still we are into that particular phase where we have to do away with reservation. I don't think we have reached that stage as of now.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So we have Bikiron sir here too. So would you,
Bikiron.
sir, would you like to say something?
Bikiron, if you would like to say something.
I have just joined. I have barely listened to any paper or anything. I mean, I am eager to listen to the participants. That's why I joined. Anyway, you guys carry on. If I have something to say, I definitely will switch my mic on and definitely will say.
As of now, we are at the very fag end of our discussions, so we will be ending our discussions. So if we can have your opinion, and we will end with your opinion on the reservation thing. If you can give your opinion on this.
My opinion on reservation. See, in the present context, as Jasmeet sir already has said, that in this situation, we are all marginalized. In some context or the other, our movements, our questions, our everything about our attitude are being restricted, are being controlled by some oppressive power, or they are trying to get us to say, get us to agree about, they are trying to, Central is trying to get us to agree with their particular strategies and everything. So in this context, I do not think that Dalits or any discrimination based on caste, creed, color or anything, in this current scenario, all of us are marginalized. All of are somehow discriminated. So we need to tell our stories. And in that regard, actually, this kind of seminars, this kind of webinars actually are very, very useful so that we can come together with our own narratives. which can challenge the center. So in this respect, I think so that would be the utility of this webinars. Over to you, sir.
Exactly.
Sir,
You're very correct.
may I say something?
I think now
Sir,
we
may I say
should
something, sir? Sir, a little
end
bit, sir.
this
Please, sir.
webinar.
Sir, Anindo wants
Sir, a
to
little bit, sir.
say something.
Anindo, please come in.
Sir, as we have time, so I want to add something more, sir. Sir, if we
Definitely.
go through the history of Dalit literature, we can see that period when Bhimrao Ambedkar or Jyotiba Phule were writing, and after that when Namdev Dasal, Om Prakash Valmiki, Arjun Dangle, Baburao Bagul are writing, and now when the people like Manohar Mouli Thakur, Kapil Krishna Thakur, they are writing, so the situations have changed. Situations have been improved. The number of Dalit writers have been increased. So a change cannot be acclaimed by overnight. But the situation is changing. It's a slow progress. I believe that it's a slow progress, but it is moving. It is moving forward. So we can hope that someday it will, be eradicated. All the divisions, all the discriminations. Basically, we are talking about all the discriminations. Discriminations in various levels: social level, literary level, family level, any level. So as we are trying our best, so there are also many people who are trying their best. So all endeavor, and as Ornesha was pointing out that and as you told that until and unless we change our point of view, our style of thinking, our style of portraying, so nothing could be achieved or nothing can be achieved. So we have to think in a different way because we all are aware of the hegemony that has conquered our brain for a long time. So we hope that by writing the counter discourse, by writing the writing from the by dealing with the writing from the marginal areas, so we hope that someday the situation that we want, equality, liberty, fraternity, these words are in the constitution. So these words or these ideas can also prevail in the society. But we have to work tirelessly. We have to work. If we stop, then the process would not be stopped, but it would be delayed. That is the main thing. We have to work. We have to work more and more. So someday it will be. We shall overcome. That is the thing, sir. We shall overcome someday. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Anindo. So I think these webinars are a literary way of understanding the narratives of the marginalized. I think the presentations have enriched each and every participants here. In fact, it has enriched us also, people hosting this kind of a thing. Thank you, sir, from Maharashtra, Kolhapur, for being a part of us. Thank you. I would like to thank each and every participant, by the way, who has been presenting this paper and has been with us for now. It has been a fruitful session. Hope we will meet again someday, somewhere, definitely in a webinar. With this, I think I would now hand it over to the students coordinator to kindly carry forward.
Hello. Hello, sir.
Thank you, Jasmeet sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Please,
Yes,
please
sir.
say something.
Please share the video. YouTube channel,
Okay,
please
sir.
share. If it is
Okay, sir.
possible, please share the YouTube channel.
Yes,
Definitely,
sir. Definitely, sir. We would notify you.
Thank
And
you, all
even
the
some of
participants.
mail IDs of the authors, those who have contributed to this webinar. Because we can share also some thoughts with them.
Okay, sir.
Yes, absolutely, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jasmeet Singh, sir, for your kind cooperation, and thank you very much for both the student coordinators for their continuous support that has made this session, successful. Thank you very much, and thank you all the participants.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. So I have a question.
Okay.
Yes, Medhatithis, I have a question. So
Yes, sir.
as we are going to end up our session, so is it the end of our seminar, or we are supposed to join in another session or main session? Is there anything like that? I don't know
Now,
about that.
if you have had Glucon-D, so you can definitely join some other
No,
seminar.
sir.
Hello,
As
sir.
of now, I
Hello.
think this is the end of our seminar. Yes, sir.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Yes, sir.
And next time you choose few topics and few presenters with the more time, because the time was less for explanation. It was just 10 minutes or 12 minutes. So the topic was not given proper, what we can say, proper justice.
Sir,
So
we
next
have
time choose
almost
few topics with the few presenters.
So this seminar, we have almost 110 presenters with more than 10 parallel sessions. So we try to accommodate each and every presenter. So that's why the time has been cut short for each one. But
That
okay,
is what I am saying, that next time keep the numbers less in order that the justice can be given to the topic.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Medhatithis, conclude the session kindly.
Okay, sir. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. We have a wonderful intellectual presentation today. Thank you very much for enlightening us and motivating us with your wonderful researches. I would like to extend my gratitude to all of them for whom arranging this webinar has been possible. I would like to thank the honorable principals of Rishi Bankim Chandra College and Rishi Bankim Chandra Evening College, Dr. Sanjeev Shah and Dr. Debashish Bhomik, for supporting us and helping us to hold this webinar. I would like to thank the chairpersons of today's session, Dr. Jasmeet Singh and Professor Anindya Chakraborty, without whose guidance this session would not have been this smooth. I thank all the participants for their cooperation. Without your participation, this webinar would have been meaningless. And last but not the least, I would like to thank Dr. Shubhabrot Sarkar, Associate Professor, Department of English, Rishi Bankim Chandra College, without whose inspiration, guidance, support and belief, nothing would have been possible. I once again thank you all, and here we come to the end of our international webinar. Meet again in some other webinars or seminars. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Good night, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, good night.
Thank you very much.
Medha, please switch off the recording.